Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast, is brought to you by you. If you want to learn how to support our podcast network, head to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan Moriarty. Dagan, good to see you today, my friend. How are you?
Good to see you. Almost didn't see you guys.
Yeah.
The guys waited very patiently for me for 17 minutes while I wrapped up some stuff at work. So thank you for that. Listen, enough about me. We've got a legend with us today.
That's absolutely right.
Also, Locke is here.
Oh.
Wow.
I'm here every week. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, let's get right into it. Lockmort, welcome to the show, my friend. The first time, regrettably, maybe, that we've had a European on the show. So I'm welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's very weird for me to actually interact with you guys because normally I try to make you say the dumbest shit, but now I can do it myself and I don't even have to edit it. So.
Yeah, it's good to have you. For people that don't know, first of all, do you want to go by Lockmort? Because you have a real name.
I do have a real name, yeah. But people call me Locke. That's
okay.
Perfectly fine. Yeah.
I only discovered your real name when you started working for us because I have to pay you for you. So for people that don't know, you do a lot of our edits and shorts, like the funny, Lockmort's edits. You're Lockmort. You're the Lockmort. And I discovered. So I pay everyone over PayPal, and then I send everyone their 1099s or whatever. Although you're different because you're in Europe, but.
Yeah.
I discover everyone's full names through that. And I remember going through, and I won't say your name on the thing, but I'm like, who the fuck is this? Like when I was going through my names, I'm like, who is this? Because there's like a bunch of people I trade G.I. Joes with, everyone I pay for on Last Stand, all this other stuff, family members. And then there's just TS, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to make of this, but then I figured out it was you. So welcome to the show, my friend. And
thank you.
And good to see you. And do you have a cat? Is that a cat in the background? Tell me everything about it.
I don't have a cat. Yeah, that's my cat. Yeah.
Tell me everything about the cat.
Well, her name is Ellie. She's named after Ellie from The Last of Us. And I found her at the start of COVID. I was walking home one day and she was just there in the street. She was like 4 or 5 weeks old. So I took her to the vet and now she's living with me.
Awesome.
Nice.
Love it. Love cats. We want to get a cat at some point too, because Dagan and I are both historically cat people that have turned into dog people as we gotten older. But I still have a real soft spot for the cat.
Oh,
for the classic cat. Shout out to Ellie.
Kyle, it's going to take a special kind of cat to coexist with those two mutts of yours.
Oh yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be in complete hell on earth in there, but it's going to be. But we're going to make it happen. I mean, Rush is not really that crazy. It's Treble that's just absolutely she's out of her mind.
Bonkers.
She's totally out of her mind. I think it's just because she has such a little head, little brain. Smooth. I call her smooth brain. Anyway, good to have you here, Locke. Dustin Furman, executive producer. Welcome to the show. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. And I know Locke loves the spotlight being on him. So I got to talk about Locke a little more. I'm so excited he's finally on something of our content here. I got to say, I've been a fan of Locke for so many years before he knew who I was, when he was doing edits for Kind of Funny, the legendary Avocado Gate video, of course, a Locke original. And then it was funny, just some background about how we got closer connected to Locke is that when we rebranded the company, Locke had done a short edit. And I was like, dude, this is great. And so I don't know, Locke, what happened. We ended up messaging each other or something.
You messaged me on Discord to tell me that if I would put it up on Twitter, that you would retweet it. So I did.
Yeah.
And then you retweeted it. And then we started talking. And now we're...
The romance bloomed from there. And I got to, like, the first time you put me in an edit, that was, how there's celebrities that are like, oh, I made it when Weird Al made a parody of my song. I felt like I made it when I was in a Lockmort edit. I feel like that's a big moment for a lot of people. So I have nothing but the highest remarks for you and your work. And I'm so happy you're here.
Wow, that's very kind of you.
Wow, that's some plaudit that you gave there. I appreciate that.
Very nice.
He deserves it.
Do you still do things for Kind of Funny too, Locke?
No, absolutely not. As soon you got me in the divorce, so when you got divorced,
I got you in the divorce. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to have you guys all here. God, it's hot as fucking hell here right now. It's 96 degrees out, I think. Yeah. And God, I don't know, man. It was even too hot to go in the pool yesterday. I went into the pool at dusk because like you're just getting bombarded with sun rays. And but the solar panels are liking it. Solar panels are doing a great job. Solar panels love the global warming.
They do.
Yeah. So keep it coming. You know, it's really all self-fulfilling because we need it for the AC, right? And then it just keeps this vicious cycle going. Although I said on Sacred Symbols, I was reading that the average per capita American emits less CO2 now than before World War II. So we are doing the work in the United States. Are they doing the work elsewhere in the world?
No, absolutely not.
Some places,
not here. No,
not. Well, not anymore. Well, maybe since you got cut off from Russian oil, maybe you guys will you'll be living in the Stone Age soon enough. Locke, since you're here with us, I wanted to start with you and hear what your topic is. Of course, this is a topical podcast. So introduce us to your topic this weekend. We'll go around the horn and we'll talk about it as much as you like, see if it pleases you. So I leave it to you.
Sure. Well, my topic is taking things too far. And I got to that topic because I think about a dozen or maybe more edits of you guys that I can't put out there because they're too bad. Not because they're not funny, but because they're very racist or very sexist or very, very not normal. So I was wondering how...
That sounds like all you, by the way.
I agree.
Mostly. But it also doesn't pertain just to edits, but also to real life. Like the other day, I was in a Discord, and Dustin and I have a little bit of an adversarial relationship in a Discord. Like I call him a weep, and for some reason he calls me a bear fucker. I don't know why, but
the Baldur's Gate 3, your favorite game. For that reason.
Fucking bears.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I call him a weep. He calls me a bear fucker. That's basically how we interact on Discord. And the other week, there was this guy who put up a message there, and he asked me, like, why are you guys so mean to each other? Like, you're supposed to be friends. So I told him, like, we're just messing around. Like, I like Dustin. We're just having fun. And then he messaged me again. And he said, but that's all you do. That's all I see you guys do. You're always mean to each other. So then I started thinking like, oh, shit, yeah, maybe a lot of people think I'm an asshole because I'm always going after Dustin. Or maybe people think Dustin is an asshole for always coming after me. Probably not, but it's possible. So I was wondering, maybe, do you guys ever had a situation where you took things too far with like a friend or with your family member and there were other people around and they took it the wrong way?
Yeah, it's fun. I'm sorry, I'm writing a note down so I don't forget.
This is fun.
Yeah, this is fun. I was just thinking, the reason I wanted you to go first, Locke, is not only because you're our guest, but because this allows us to speak about something that just happened on Sacred Symbols, which is the sleep gate. Are you going to do an edit about that, about the sleep?
That is one of the edits I couldn't put out because it was too mean. But I can re-edit it and make it less mean. Yeah.
Yeah, mean's fine with me. I think mean can be funny, but because it was one of those situations on Sacred Symbols where I was busting Dustin's balls about being tired, and I even went back. So it's so funny not really knowing in the moment or disagreeing with the vibe of like the way people are taking things, which is really what happened with us, where I saw people's responses to some of that, and then I went back and I watched and listened. I very rarely listen or watch anything we do, and I went back and watched it, and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck any of you are talking about. This is so clearly supposed to be stupid and is not mean-spirited in any way. So I do think that in some ways, and it's what I was saying to Dustin, I'm not saying in this regard because I'm not talking about him, but people that observe things are so sensitive sometimes on behalf of other people, not really knowing the nature of it, the brotherliness of it, or that like my friends groups bust balls on a constant basis. That's a sign that you've made it when you get your balls busted, that you are ingratiated and people feel comfortable busting balls and stuff. So I'm more interested in how people take things. And as a content creator, I know the intention. I know that I've been on shows, I've been in really awkward positions. I've had heated discussions, all these different things. And it's almost never accurately portrayed, like by the or gleamed by the audience. So that's like what I wanted to say about that. Dustin, how did you feel about Sleepgate? You know what I was going to do, by the way? I had told Micah this and she's like, you can't do this. But I thought it was going to be really funny is what I was going to do was, like the cartoon sleeping caps,
Yeah.
So I was going to have one sent to your house, like from Amazon, like just a cheap one, but tell you not to open it until the show and then tell you that I got you a present to apologize for last week. And then you were going to open it and it was going to be a sleeping cap. And I was going to say like, so you can sleep a little bit so you can get better rest. Yeah. But then I thought, people would think that was being taken too far, even though I think that would have been fucking hysterical and probably worth the comedy. Dustin, what are your thoughts?
Well, I wish that Chris was here so we could talk about this, but I think that we need to get out in the air about how you feel about the yawning.
Oh, the yawning.
Oh.
Yeah. You've brought it up many times on shows. It's starting to feel like you might be a little sensitive about the yawning situation.
I've talked to Chris about this. He just doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
I think that yawning when someone is talking to you is like maybe one of the most rude things you can possibly do. Like it's not even like just a thing. Like there are, you basically walk away, right? Start talking to someone else. Those are maybe the more insulting things than yawning when someone's talking. Chris yawns so much though, that I feel like there is something wrong with him. Right. But I feel like in that regard, there is something wrong with him. So I bust his balls about that. But then I just kind of stopped. He probably yawned 15 times during the show yesterday.
I didn't know this was a thing. I never saw him do that on Constellation.
And it's like, because he's getting up early, I think, and all that. And I appreciate it. But like, do I really need to tell you that that's rude? Is that really a thing that I have to say? Are we fucking serious?
So here's the question about it.
Yeah.
Is that, and here's the thing. Okay. Even just bringing this up, people say I'm being sensitive about it. But in that moment, you chose to bust my balls and not Chris.
But I've busted Chris's balls before you were even on the show about it. So I just don't know. Yeah. And I'm not even busting his balls. I'm literally saying like, why are you yawning? It's just like Chris and I, some things we just don't agree on, Sure. And this is one of those things like he's just not going to stop yawning on the show. He doesn't care. He keeps saying, I'm not doing it to be insulting. It doesn't mean that I'm not listening. I'm just tired. What do you want me to do? And I'm like, I hold in yawns all the time.
Stifle the yawn.
And it's like what you did, where you cover your mouth and stuff. That I was just See, this was taken so out of. I'm sorry that it hurt your feelings at some point, but I am not.
No, the yawn part isn't what was bad. It was not that I'm saying it was so bad, but I've received a few tweets and people on Discord being like, "Oh, you're so sensitive." It's brought up. It's encouraged people to take anything I say as sensitive, which is a little annoying.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
My feelings aren't hurt.
It's kind of like how it's kind of similar to how the other day on Sacred Symbols, I was saying how I keep getting these things right. And then you just out of nowhere said, oh, but you got that one thing wrong in the text message. It was kind of similar to that, right? And now I have to have people bringing that up about how I got that one thing wrong in the text message that I never said to anyone. Similar to that?
Well, no, because you were claiming stuff and I was pointing out like it's not always 100% right.
You see,
it's similar
guys,
to that,
let me interject.
No, it's not.
From a fan perspective, I think of the people I follow, the podcasts I enjoy, the YouTube channels, all that. First of all, you record hours and hours worth of content weekly with the same people. Things are going to get real. That's number one. Number two is that shit is entertaining. I want to see it get real between the people that I go in for, like the people I admire, So from a fan perspective, an LSM fan perspective, specifically Sacred Symbols, right? I would enjoy that kind of shit.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but it's also like, that's like Stern, right? Yeah. That's classic Howard Stern, where the entire show was about fucking Ronnie, the limo driver, would be on talking for 2 hours about how he got there late, and they would just be making fun of him, and it would go on. Yeah. That would be the entire show, and I loved that shit, but that's not what I really want to do. And if I'm being totally honest, at the extent of maybe making something awkward, but I'm just going to be honest about it, is that I kind of get annoyed when people get in the way of what is obviously intended to be funny, And one of the greatest insults I can be, whenever I read something and they're like, you got in the way of a joke Chris was saying, I'm like, I didn't mean to do that. That's not, no. I don't ever want to do that. And I kind of felt like the sleep thing could have been a classic moment for a different reason if Dustin just reacted the way it was intended to be taken. But instead, he decided to get mega sensitive about it. And now he's paying the price. I'm not paying any price.
I will say, Colin, the interesting part about this, when you brought it up, while Sacred Symbols Plus, it's not out yet, is that you're like, I'm reading all these comments and everyone's wrong about this but me. So there's just different aspects. We don't need to. I don't think we can keep talking about this and go in circles about it, and you can keep calling me sensitive, but
I just think it's fun.
I've moved on about it at this point.
Oh my God, I'm just busting balls. This is the point. And what I wanted to illustrate was I didn't mean to hurt anyone's feelings. I never mean to hurt anyone's feelings. That's not that's really not my thing. I don't know why anyone would, how you could possibly listen to the show and be like, yeah, that guy's mean. Or like that guy really likes to hurt people. In fact, I'm often criticized for not like interjecting enough or like, kind of letting people say what they want to say and do. And so, no, but what was ironic is I got a couple messages being like, but you're sensitive, Colin. And I'm like, yeah, I'm mega sensitive.
Oh, me too.
But not about jokes. Can't remember the last time I thought someone was joking and I'm like sensitive about that. I'm sensitive when people insult me. Yeah, I'm fucking sensitive about that. These are different sensitivities. So, but to your point, Locke, that's me taking things too far, I guess. That was an example of me taking something too far. That's why I wanted to bring it up. Because some of the audience interpreted it that way. Also, although some of the audience didn't interpret it that way, and then Dustin interpreted it that way, people felt like it created an awkward dynamic. So you couldn't possibly but acknowledge that you probably took something too far within the interpretation of those around you, which is like really all that matters. So,
and that's going to happen too when you do shows. You're going to take things too far inadvertently. It's going to be people are going to have different perceptions. There's going to be misunderstandings, even though we're looking at each other, we're listening to listen, these family squabbles, entertaining, but they're also going to make us stronger, right? And the awkwardness, I don't know, man. I don't mean to be too mischievous, but
I was pleased people were getting a laugh out of it. Legitimately. I was like, at least this is they were saying it's an all-time sacred moment. I'm like, well,
I think it might be.
If that's the intent is for people to be entertained, then so be it.
Let me leave with a small checklist here of things that I want to acknowledge, right? Was I wrong? I guess so, if that's people's interpretation. Am I sorry? I don't want to ever hurt Dustin's feelings, so I'm sorry to Dustin. I'm not sorry for anyone else. Right? Like to interpret things how you want. I don't want to hurt people. And it wasn't about anyone else. So I'm sorry to Dustin.
Yeah.
Did he get in the way of the joke? A little bit. What? Did I open myself up to more controversy by saying that someone's sensitive when I'm sensitive? Of course. Will anyone remember this moment in 3 months? Probably not.
I will.
No, you'll. Yeah. I can't wait to see the people's response to this now.
Now
I'm gonna have
this is going to compound it.
Oh yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Well, that's the question. If people are like, Colin didn't react well, then you could say on another show, oh, nothing. No, I'm not. Dustin was being sensitive. I'm just saying. Now I'm busting your balls.
Yeah, I understand that, but
mirror,
I also want to. Yeah, that's fine. Hold the mirror up to Colin. I mean, God knows I need it. But the reality is that. I just don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. That's really not. We were actually talking about that on Sacred Symbols. And in fact, I didn't bring this up on Sacred Symbols because I was just going to let this thing go, thinking that it was going to be even funnier. But then when I saw Locke's topic come through the email, I'm like, well, this is the only possible thing to talk about. I mean, this is almost like, as Dagan and I would say, a meatball down the plate. Like you just pop that thing out. So I had to bring it up. I had to bring it up here. I had to acknowledge both what I think is true and what Dustin thinks is true. And really, we can put it to bed now. And it won't be like Howard Stern because these things on Howard Stern go on for literally years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So hymarathons.
And
I love that this
hysterical.
Is the Flashpoint, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh.
I do. I think this is a fun topic, Locke. There's a lot of different ways I could have went with this. I'm gonna put some salve on this right now by taking you back to something completely unrelated, right? I want to flash back. There's a lot of different ways I could have went with this, Locke. Those are the topics I like the most. And I got to say, I definitely admire, I think of stand-up comedians specifically, or people in the public spotlight with, a certain amount of fame. But there's also people in my life that I admire. Like, there's something in that skill of knowing just how far to take something, because that's such a sensitive thing. Context, who you're dealing with, all the specifics, all the ins and outs, right? We have one person in our life, Colin and I, our Uncle Mike, who's a natural comedian. And I've been watching him bust balls of everybody around him for 49 years, And I have to say, besides being hilarious, I have never once seen anybody get upset with him. He knows just how far to take things to, I don't even know if he has a conscious effort of that or if he just has an innate talent for it. But I've always admired that. And like, he'll push someone's buttons. You know, this could be family, friends, anybody around him, but he knows just when to quit. You know, it's a dance, you know, which I love. But I'm going to take you back to being a kid and not knowing when to quit, because I made busting balls an art form with our sister, our older of our two sisters, our sister Dana. And this is the first thing I thought of when you emailed the topic, Locke, that when I was 16, 17 years old, now Dana and I are about a year and a half apart. We're a year apart in school. So she was class of 93. I was class of 92. So very close in age. I was slightly older. And there was a sibling rivalry, I guess, growing up, although we were close when we were kids. But by the time we became teenagers, there was definitely some of that. I don't want to say bad blood, but certainly sibling rivalry, but more so for me directed to her, because I think in retrospect, I was really jealous of my sister. You know, so let me give you some background on her. She always, especially in high school, right? Very mature, very responsible, took school very seriously, did well, took her academics serious, right? Played team sports, very involved in school, played soccer, was on the track team, kind of involved in student body, student government, very preppy, very responsible, had a job before I even had a job. I think she started working when she was like 13 or 14. And so it was way before I had a job. And, you know, she was always like she was like the model citizen, you know, and all I wanted to do was skateboard and play video games and just fuck off.
Here, this is her. We never really see her, but she sent me this picture of me and her when
that's a great picture.
That's cool.
Yeah. So you would be how old in that picture, Kyle? 9?
Yeah, probably. That was probably like 90, 93, 94, something like that. Yeah.
So she would be, 16.
Oh,
those are great pictures.
Yeah, she actually sent me these the other week and I cried when I saw them. Because you know when you see pictures of you and you like don't know they exist and they're an actual moment, like it's an actual I actually did cry.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm crying.
That's going to play into your topic.
Indeed.
In a little later. But that's actually a great visual, because this is the exact age Dana I'm talking about right now. But I think it would start by teasing her about a guy she was dating, whatever. And I would just keep going. I didn't do this with anybody else in my life, by the way. Colin and our other sister, Allie, I didn't do this with at all. I think it was just the dynamic that we were so close in age. You know, and by high school, you're passing each other in the hallway and she's kind of ignoring me and I'm laughing at her with my friends and stuff like that. So there was a little bit of that.
Another illustration, me and Dagan.
Oh my God. You sent me that one.
Yeah.
I love that picture. That's probably just a few years earlier, right? Than the time I'm talking about. Right.
But that was our relationship. So I never had you never busted my balls.
And I have to say, in Dana's defense, I was so mean to her. And her posture was completely defensive. She never started in on me at all. I could be coming down the stairs. Maybe she's like making toast in the kitchen or something. That would be enough. I would just walk in and I would just bombard her and it started like typical big brother shit, right? Like just teasing about what she was wearing, one of her friends, her hair, you know, a guy that she was talking to on the phone, whatever it was. And I think I just wanted her to acknowledge me. So I was getting a reaction. So it was, not only was it fun, but she was actually not ignoring me, right? So it was almost like I almost kind of operated as the little kind of conniving pain in the ass brother. And she had the dynamic of being the older sister who I was busting her chops. But she would get so mad at me that I would push it to the point of her opening the drawer of knives in the kitchen next to the stove. I remember exactly where it was situated. And she would just take a handful of like butcher knives and cleavers, whatever she could get a hold of. And she would run after me. And I don't know what would have happened if she caught me. First of all, she was a track star in high school. And I think I was always mad because I think I was fast, but I had no way to prove it. So I would always be like, I'm faster than you. Let's go have a race outside or whatever. So I was operating on pure adrenaline because I think she got so mad at me that I don't know what she would have done had she ever caught up to me. And maybe she was kind of limiting herself a little bit because maybe she was just trying to scare me in retrospect. But I remember that being a thing, like an absolute optimum example of just pushing things too far with her for probably 2 or 3 years of high school, where that was like a regular thing where I would push her far enough to get so mad that she would either chase me until I had to lock myself in my room or just run down the block until she got tired of, trying to catch me.
Let me ask you this, Dagan, because I think I might have asked you this in the past, but I don't really remember what your answer was. Do you wish that you had a more, let's use an early 90s reference, like a Brandon Walsh relationship?
I love that.
90210 reference, of course. Now, they had their problems, but they were kind of thick as thieves.
They
right?
were friends.
And I wonder, like, do you wish that was the reality instead? Because like it could have gone a totally different way. Like you guys were only a year apart. You really could have like circled and been in mutual circles and stuff. You guys were very different cliques. Yeah. And Dana was popular,
She was very popular.
And that's an important thing to remember too, is that Dana was like a popular girl. She was probably the most popular of all 4 of us in high school.
Oh,
by a mile, I think, actually.
Yeah.
No offense, Allie.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kyle. Because we were coexisting in high school at the same time, right. Late 80s, early 90s.
So you could have like gotten that energy and like kind of been boys, kind of, like, do you regret that looking back that you could have been friends?
Yeah, not just a social hierarchy thing, which maybe could have been cool in a way, but because she was way up here and I was way down here. And the fact that I was older added insult to injury too, because it was like my little sister and she's got all this social clout and I've got none. But I more regret not being friends like a Brenda and what was his name?
Brendan. Yeah. Is it Brendan and Brenda? Brandon, I want to say Brandon Walsh.
But
Brenda Walsh.
Because we were such good friends growing up. Like Dana and I always say, like before Allie came along 5 years after I was born, like it was just me and Dana. So we go back, we have that rich history together. We were the ones that, kicked things off. There was a certain period of time where it was just us. So we have that strong foundation. And then we're such good friends now that, we both laugh about this, but it was completely 100% my fault. Like I was just I don't know if it was a mean-spirited sort of phase that I was going through or something, but I just could not stop busting this poor girl's balls, So my regret comes in the fact of like, I was just mean. I was just, and I thought it was funny. I don't think in retrospect, I was directing it towards feeling angry or feeling like I was hurting her feelings. I just thought it was entertaining, and I had the maturity as a 16-year-old. I had the maturity of maybe a 7-year-old, literally. That was my whole thing. That'll play into my job topic later on with Dustin's topic a little bit more. So I'll save that. But yeah, Dana really was, the inheritor of like all of my teenaged, whatever it is, mischief, pranks. I would love to spy on her. I love to spy on her conversations and hold something she said against her that was supposed to be private. It was really, I mean, if you know me now, going back 30 years, you'd be like, what Dagan was that? It was like evil Dagan, right? It was like dark side Dagan. So that's really something in my life where I just push things too far, but I knew it. I knew I was pushing things too far. That was the whole idea, was to just get a rise out of her. And I think I'll always feel she's forgiven me. Obviously, we buried the hatchet, and we're such good friends.
Buried the butcher knife.
She's one of my favorite people on earth. Yeah,
she's great.
But it's that was. I wish we had video footage of it. It would make me
incriminating.
Yeah, you probably don't wish you had video footage. I think we all are lucky in some ways and various things that we don't have. We didn't grow up in that time, where everyone's just ruining their lives on a constant basis. I'm the one watching this stuff online. I know that you're ruining your lives out there. I'm seeing it. Dustin, do you have anything you would want to say on this topic?
Well, I want to touch back to some of the stuff that Locke was saying about the edits, just because I have a little background on some of this, and that. So almost, I think, how many times have I asked you to make content change? Maybe
You're very fair. I think maybe
2 or
twice.
3 times, maybe.
Yeah.
And one of them was just like, I think this could be a little better idea. There has been 1 or 2 times where I think about this as like a gradient, right? That we're on, like, if you think about games media or whatever, or just like content creators, we're definitely on the rough side, but we're not the roughest, but we definitely are like cool with almost whatever. And Locke, what I've picked up about you, I don't know if it's a European sensibility, if you're just a freak or something. Not a freak, but if you're just very rough. But there's certain things where I don't know if I'm like, Locke, okay, this joke, this one might not be. This is like, if this video went out to only our audience, then I think it would be totally fine. Like, they would get it. But there's just a few things like, let's maybe not do that.
I love being made look stupid in those videos. I think it's hysterical. I don't know. There's just something about it that's very self-effacing, and like, you gotta kind of own it, you know.
I realized something, Colin. We totally played into Lockmort's hands, because he was already admitted that he was thinking about or had an edit about the sleep stuff from Sacred Symbols. And then he has every once in a while been like, Dustin, if you talk about this would be helpful for an edit on Sacred Symbols. Tries to influence me.
Oh, interesting.
And now he has direct influence on a show.
Yeah.
And it worked.
And we got played, dude.
Damn, dude.
That's fucking 4D. Played.
That's 4D. I mean, what are you going to do about that? That's one of the things. You just got to accept that.
Yeah, we just gotta.
You got.
Yeah,
and you got got. In the words of Dennis, dude, I got too. I got got.
Locke thinks he's okay. Locke has done something to me once where I told him one of the 2 times that I asked you for content edit, I said, let's take out this joke because it's not good. Now I know a million people are going to ask what it was. I'm not going to say what it is. It's just, we'll skip it.
It was horribly racist.
It was, it was horribly racist. It wasn't No, it wasn't racist, the one I'm thinking of. So I asked you to change it, and then you send me the edit, the version 2, and you totally didn't change it. I'm like, Locke, it's still in there. And you're like, oh,
awesome.
that trick usually works on the other people I work for. I'm like, you motherfucker.
That fucking rules. I love that.
You're so, Locke, I'm exposed. You expose us, now you're exposed.
No, I love that. You're growing in my esteem by the minute.
Oh, thank you. I do have to say, I think Dustin, you do a great job producing me anyway, because he gives me great advice, even when the edits could be better. Dustin is mostly the one who perfects them. I always send them to Dustin first, and he always tells me, maybe this could be here, or maybe we could do this, and that makes it better. And it is always better before afterwards. So you're doing a great job.
Good notes.
Let me say something totally out of left field, but since Lockmort's European but speaking English, he probably speaks English better than 80% of Americans. Have you noticed that? Do you think that's a little bit bit embarrassing for some people listening to this sometimes when you see a multilingual person with such command?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? I always think about that stuff when I talk to people around the world. I'm like, where does this come from? I can't speak fucking anything. I was in French class for 8 years.
Yeah, almost a decade.
Locke, how many languages do you speak?
Well, I speak Dutch, of course. I speak English. I speak French, German, a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of Italian. And, well, I wouldn't say I speak Russian, but
they call that being a polyglot, right? POLYGLOT.
Yeah. Yes.
Like when you're really multilingual?
Yeah, the judge.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, in Blood Meridian, right. What did you say, Dustin? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Locke said I'm not a pedophile. You guys didn't hear
it. Fair enough. Yeah, that's so impressive, man. That's totally just neither here nor there. And you don't need to be congratulated for your lingual skills. But America is so, I don't know, English.
Selfish.
That's just how we grew up.
In some way. Yeah, it is. And you really appreciate it out in California, too, because so many people speak Mandarin or Cantonese, one of those, and then Spanish, obviously, everywhere. Yeah. Actually, Ramon always used to say, and I was with him a couple times, I think, in California when this happened, where like people speak Spanish to him, assuming he speaks Spanish, and he doesn't. Just because like that's just just because of his brown skin.
Yeah.
All right.
I do have the thing I will actually say about Locke's topic, the number one time that I face issues with this is, well, I feel like I've gotten a little better recently, but not, I'm still working on it. It's just through the internet, through text communication, where it's like I unintentionally take things too far or totally sound a way that I didn't mean to sound. Happens to me all the time. I learned a few years back that, I don't know who told me this or something, like, Dustin, you are an angry typer. I'm like, I don't know how to fix. I've learned ways to get around it and try to sound better. You know, like adding exclamation points, adding smiley faces. And I know there are better ways. Those are like Band-Aids on how to fix that. But I was like, man, I oftentimes come off in a way that I do not intend over text. This happens to me. It's like I said, I like to think that I've gotten better at it, or at least learned to portray myself a little better. But that's and Locke, I'm glad you brought up about the Discord stuff, our fake feud on Discord, because it is something, you know, that interaction where the guy was like, you guys hate each other. I'm like, I like to think of it that you and I don't think, like, literally think about it like this, but it's like we're making jokes for everybody in front of, you know, we're putting on a little show.
Of course.
And then I thought either A, people don't pick up on that, or B, they also want to put on a little show, but they don't have the same relationship that we do. And so not everyone will take it the right way. And it's like, so maybe we shouldn't do that. But it's still, I don't know. I feel like people understand. I made fun of you today because of you like, what is it? Fire Emblem, which is definitely a Wii game.
I told you that in confidence, and you just blasted that to everyone. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Fire Emblem really blew up. It's very interesting how that series has just kind of bubbled away and then just really blew up. Locke, where's your mind on this? This is your topic. I want to hear, you know, obviously in your art, your edits, you take things too far, and I think that's fun. But how about in your real life?
Well, I take things too far all of the time, really. That's one of my biggest flaws. My friends keep telling me the same thing. Dustin or Ben or somebody in the Discord told me the other day that I do it to them too. Like, I make a joke, but I don't stop. And I think European humor is very crass, and it's very, very, we always have to be careful. When we talk to Americans, we always have to be careful what we say. Because your country has many more sensitivities than my country has. And sometimes maybe that clashes a little, but that's also our fault, because we have to be careful to how we conduct ourselves towards other people. So I don't have a direct example, but it happens every day.
Well, where do you think that comes from? You're Dutch, right?
Yeah.
So the Netherlands has a pretty dark history over the last, 100 years of. I just wonder if like that's gallows humor type shit in Europe, where like you have to laugh or you cry kind of stuff.
Well, I am Dutch, but I've lived in Belgium.
Belgium. Well, same thing, same history.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely,
right?
Definitely.
The literal same exact thing happened to you. So, yeah.
I think that definitely has something to do with it. We've been through two world wars in my country too, and people were when those wars were done, people had the feeling like everything goes now, and I think we never lost that. So people here are miserable too, like you guys often are in the States, but people here react to it differently. Like we never give up. Not that you guys ever give up, but we were very mean-spirited, but in a good way towards each other. Like we treat everyone with respect, but we can also mock everyone, and everyone can mock us.
I think the United States has, this is class. And I hate this term, first world problems. I don't like that because it's obviously all relative, but I think that our sensitivities belie this sort of reality that we have very little to worry about. So we find stupid things to quibble over. And I always think about that. Like, we're surrounded by oceans, surrounded by friendly countries. We have enough food. We grow so much food in the United States that we actually have to pay farmers not to grow food, so prices don't go so far down. We have oil and gas and solar power and wind power, and we can do anything here. It just seems like we're inoculated from the realities of living in a small country, living in a country that's really reliant or kind of interdependent on others. And I think that European mentality is very interesting to me, because we're brethren, obviously, right? And the United States, I don't know exactly how Europeans at large look at us. I think it's somewhat negative these days, it seems like, but I think that we still feel at least a one-way tether to Europe. We still say we're Irish, we're Italian, we're Belgian, we're whatever, which I think is weird. In fact, I got into a little bit of not an argument, but like I was making a point at a recent family gathering where it's like, oh, that's the Italian and that's it. And I'm like, we've been here since fucking 1850. Are we really going to continue to do this? Now the Italians came over in like the 1830s, I think, or the 1820s. But the Irish side of us, I'm like, why are we pretending like we have any? And I know Europeans make fun of that. Like, I do know that Europeans are like, that's the dumbest shit ever. When you say like,
that's interesting.
When you go to Ireland and you're like, oh, I'm half Irish. Like, you're not fucking Irish. What are you talking about? You're not Irish at all. And I know, in fact, it was funny. I saw Barstool Sports, I think it was. They always do like funny videos, like going around interviewing people or whatever. And they went to an Irish music festival and had people do their best American accents. I don't know if you guys saw this. And a lot of them were saying like, oh, I'm half Irish. Like, oh, like, so that was like what they immediately went to make fun. Yeah. Like, so yeah, just shout out to Europe. I want to say that we bust European balls a lot. But that's the center of like our civilization, really. So like it almost makes you wonder, I guess what I'm saying, Locke, is if we're just a step behind that mentality, since we are a step behind many other things that are originally European.
Well, you guys definitely are not, because otherwise you wouldn't even allow me making those edits for you. So you enjoy your self-deprecation and you enjoy your mockery too. I was telling Dustin before we started recording that over the past 2 months I was working for another company. I won't name them, but I had to record meetings for them. And at some point last week, I decided, well, what if I just make an edit out of one of those meetings, like one of those edits I make for you guys? So I did that and I showed it to them, and they got furious with me. Like they practically almost fired me.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. which is completely fine, which is completely their right. But just to say that it's not just an American thing, it's also other people do it too. And you guys are the opposite of that. Like you have just as much self-deprecation as we do, and you enjoy mockery too. So
I'm of the mind that being a good loser is really important, and that radiates around to other things like being good-natured, taking your good ribbing and all of that. That way, I think it's a protective measure, isn't it? Because it allows you, if you take the high road or not the high road, if you're holier than thou, let's say, and in your tower and you get insulted about things and you take things seriously and all of that, then you're really not allowed to take anything seriously or be affronted to anything. And then people will throw that back at you. I think it's quite vital that people just, as it were, take their L's, take their lumps, kind of go with the flow. It doesn't mean you can't be sensitive to personal insults and all that kind of stuff. That's different. But just, I think being like going along to get along is just a good way to, and just kind of trusting that people have good intentions. Because I was thinking, and I wrote down in my notes and I wanted to say this, like a person that I know and love can be like, you're a fucking loser. And I wouldn't think that was a problem. And then someone who I didn't trust or like could say like, good luck out there. And I'd be like, yeah, fucking right, dude. It doesn't matter even what you're necessarily saying or being told. It matters like who's saying it.
Yeah.
And, so I just, from my point of view, taking things too far, we have all done it. I think we've all been victimized by it too. But I think that by having a lot of latitude with people that you care about or love, or just having that instinct, I think would go a long way to ameliorating a lot of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and being able to give and get. Like, I love what Locke's saying about the European sort of mindset or sensibility of kind of thick skin is sort of a prerequisite. Like, you have to have the thick skin, and then you could let people have it, and you could also absorb. It's important to be able to laugh at yourself, and that's also kind of fun. But then again, I'm very sensitive too, so I could understand being offended. And it goes back to what Dustin's saying too about the whole text email thing. It's complicated because it's not just in the doing, it's also in the interpreting. So you can only control so much because it really depends on who you're dealing with, what individual you're dealing with, and their whole their level of sensitivity, I guess. It makes it a really interesting topic because it's kind of never ending. It's
funny, like with emails and correspondence, especially with people I don't know, I'm over the top with like I hope all is well and thanks for reaching out and all that. Like, there's just no possible way you can interpret me as being anything other than like jovial and probably much nicer than I actually am in real life.
Yeah.
And then as I get more and more comfortable with you, my emails start to truncate, where my most common signature is a heart and -Colin, like the less than sign 3 -Colin. That's like how I sign my, like when I'm actually in with you, that's usually how I'll end things. But at the end, it'll be like, all right, thank you for your time. And I hope you have a great weekend. Take care, Colin. Yeah.
In other words, there's no other way to interpret.
Yeah. Like,
this.
how could you possibly, I was told at IGN by Mark Ryan, my first editor on IGN Guides, the guy that hired me there, that I used way too many exclamation points in my guides and I needed to stop.
And you taught me that.
And I was very, there's certain writing lessons that I got over time. I must admit that I like went through a lot. I was a very naturally gifted writer from a young age. I know that. Like, that's the one thing I was really good at. And I went to college kind of being like, there's really nothing that you guys are going to teach me, which was totally insane. Not that I like went out of my way. I never said that, but that was in my mind. And then when you were in the professional world and you started getting checked, and then you would go back and read your work and be like, oh yeah, I really understand what you're saying about this specific thing. Craig was actually said many things about my writing that totally changed the way I do things. And
interesting.
Like beat into my brain. This is why it comes up like fewer and less than, like that's beaten into my brain. I will, anytime someone uses the wrong one of that, it's like, cause he did that to me over and over and over again. And so I don't know. I just, this is an interesting topic because taking things too far is, I guess, part of human nature. But I also see like our animals doing it. I wrote that in my notes as well. Like animals taking things too far too. Like how far they, like Rush knows my voice intonation and takes me serious, like really seriously only when I'm like very stern. Be like, come on, boy, let's go inside and get a treat. And he'll just look at me and continue to walk around the yard and be like, all right, come on, let's, and like, but then if I like go and look at him then, so like, it's funny how everyone kind of pushes the limit in some sense. Anyway, anything else to say about this topic before we move on?
No, it's good. We're good.
Good one.
All right, my friends. Dustin, let's go to you next. I want to hear about your topic.
Sure. So my topic is about our old jobs, and specifically before. I mean, I know Dagan and Locke are freelancers and do all kinds of stuff, but I wanted to highlight some stuff before gaming because I've heard about Colin in the deli. And I think Dagan, you you worked at a grocery store? Am I remembering that properly?
That was primarily, that was my big one. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, before Last Stand, I actually have only had one job in my whole life outside of Last Stand. And that was my old video editing job that I've talked about a few times. And it was funny how it worked out, just because initially the summer that I graduated high school, I wanted to get just like a part-time job before I started college in the spring. And so I was trying to get in at this landscape, or doing landscape at a nursing home, because my friend worked there, and that ended up not working out, which honestly, thank God. The thought of me in the sun for any period of time now is just horrendous. But I knew this guy from my work, from my church, who did video production, and my dad, I didn't ask my dad to ask him. My dad just preemptively was like, hey, my son's into video stuff. If you have any work for him, then we can, if you could send his way, you could try him out.
Classic dad.
So it's a dad move.
Dude, Travis Furman. And he came through because I started just by editing a few multicam weddings. And then eventually I was in the office for a few days a week editing stuff. And then eventually there 5 days a week. And it's funny because the job I have now is nothing like that job in some ways, but it's somewhat similar in that both of them were really, I guess, comparative to like a corporate job, very small scale. The editing job, I was the only employee on payroll. There was people we had freelance, but I was the only employee. And that's how it was at Last Stand for a long time, is that I was the only employee. But doing video work in a more, corporate-y or wedding or whatever freelance type ways was a really had a lot of interesting situations that it had me in, certainly you'd go to a wedding, you'd see people that are hammered and then trying to get your attention on camera. There's plenty of stories like that. Dude, so many times filming at weddings, the number one thing, this was guaranteed to happen 3 or 4 times, is that some old guy would walk by and be like, oh, don't film me, I'm wanted. Or like, oh, get my good side. Like always the old guys flipping at you.
Love that. Dad energy.
Always.
Love it.
I did find myself in some particularly, nothing ever crazy, but definitely some odd situations where one of them we were hired to help film these medical videos where we met this lady where she rented out an old doctor's office. And so this lady, when we got there, we started to realize was like definitely kind of strange. We really picked up on this when we went to lunch and we came back and she was just smoking inside in one of the rooms. Now, it's important to point out that this building was half being used by an actual doctor, and she's on the other side of a door lighting up a cigarette. She's like, oh, I'm just so stressed out. Well, the funny part about this was she didn't have or certain people didn't show up to be like models on camera to be like the patient. So she asked us if we knew anybody. And my boss, Mark, at the time was like, well, Dustin could do it. So I got in the gown, and here's the thing. And I made this deal with my boss. I'm like, well, are you still going to pay me? And she's going to pay me. He's like, yeah, that's fine. So I was making double. So I'm laying, getting, I wonder if these videos are out there. It'd be so funny if someone found them. There's like me laying on a thing and she's like feeling my stomach. And she was like, had her lipstick like all like kind of like off of her lips and kind of weird. And she was slurring her speech. Like, I don't know if she was an alcoholic, if she didn't smell like liquor, but she definitely was something ain't right. So luckily, I mean, I was making probably like $40 or $50 an hour doing that job at the time. But so every once in a while we would run into these interesting characters. That lady ended up totally ghosting us after that job. And we had to basically go on a mini manhunt on the internet. We ended up finding her dad and calling her dad. And we found out that she was like in rehab somewhere.
Dude, that's so awesome. You're like part of this woman's like last days of fucking depravity. So
yeah. So yeah, we would do it. And
that's good shit.
That was one of the unique parts of that job, is that, of course, the day to day was we are transferring videotapes to digital, or we're scanning photos, we're editing a wedding. There's those kind of standard jobs that are just always coming in and out. But it did enable me to do a lot of unique and interesting things on the side. Like we filmed stuff at the local hospital where we got to go into the surgical ward and we had to like gear up and stuff to film in there. We didn't film any surgeries, but it was still cool being back there. We filmed at the local steel plant and got to see them like just totally disgusting. Like there's like oil that's caked on the walls from like 1930 and stuff like that. They're pouring molten metal into these giant bars, like super dangerous places to be. Cool. So stuff like that. And then filming like, different, the one job we were filming for the local state police, they ran like a summer camp for kids. And so one of the days we got to film all the kids at the gun range. And so the state police guys were super nice. They're like, hey, camera guy. And so I got to shoot an AR-15 that day alongside a bunch of kids. So that was kind of weird, but fun. So it was one of those things where towards the end of that job, I was really trying to figure out how to get a job in the gaming space, even if it was doing something stupid like capturing or whatever. I just... I very specifically remember this one moment where one of our big clients was Miss Pennsylvania, like the Miss Pennsylvania pageant. And so it was like day 3 of 4 and I'm sitting, we had to like carry the gear up all these stairs. And this was the 3rd year of doing it. And I just was like, I know that I'm blessed that I'm doing a job in something that I'm interested in. I don't want to lose that. I know that I have it good, but I got to get out of here. I got to do something else. And luckily, shortly, I think it was within the year is when I first started doing stuff for Colin. So in hindsight now, looking back, it was a a fun job. I'm very thankful. I learned so many skills during that job. I always say the reason why I can make cool thumbnails is that one of our clients made model train documentaries, and he had this insistence of everything looking perfect. So we had to create mats of the backgrounds where I would like take a screenshot, put it into Photoshop. We would hide like a vent or something like that. And so it was I didn't really know how to use Photoshop. It was just kind of run and gun, look something up on the internet, try to figure it out. But those skills ended up, I'm now somewhat proficient at Photoshop, at least enough to make a stupid picture.
The fucking, where did you find this picture of Jim Ryan with this new
I believe
thumbnail? This is one of the craziest pictures of Jim Ryan that exists.
Yeah, that one I just searched Jim Ryan's sunglasses. You got to figure out how to like find the juicy ones that no one's ever used before.
Yeah.
I thought people might be annoyed with Jim Ryan in 2 thumbnails in a row, but you used the name of the episode was the quote, the total mind share. Like Jim's got to be on the thumbnail. So, but anyway,
that's a good. You're very, very talented in that regard, man. Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff's so hard for me. I was saying before how like writing was my natural talent. I'm literally have anti art talent. Like it's like negative art talent. It's insulting that how little I can actually do. And with by hand or certainly on these programs, they're very intimidating. The only thing I've ever kind of found my way around with like an artistic program was Premiere. And it's very like, I'm probably 10% there, you know, of like I've gotten command of exponential fade and shit like that, you know? Like,
yeah. Well, dude, I truly believe this, and this is actually a great segue to throw this over to Lockmort, is that Premiere is more about knowing like not the ins and outs. Obviously you need to know the ins and outs, but like the secret things that you wouldn't think you need to know, like, if you want to do this, you have to do this workaround. Or if this happens and this isn't right, this is what you need to do. That's like half the battle with Premiere. And that's the type of thing that just takes like literally a decade of using Premiere. Cause I think I started using Premiere in 2010, I think, when I was in 11th grade was when I started using Premiere. And so, yeah, it's been 13 years now I've been using Premiere in one way or another. But Locke, you've had probably some similar experiences to mine, because I know that you've also been in the freelance, the video game, not video games isn't, but the video world. So I'm just curious, have you had strange experiences like mine, or just any other jobs you want to talk about?
Well, I was actually going to start talking about another job I did, and I don't think I've ever told you this either, because when I was done with high school, I held a speech. Like every graduate in our high school held a speech. That was like tradition. So I did my speech, and then we proceeded with the handing out of the diplomas. And after that, this guy in a suit came up to me, and he told me, "Kid, you're gonna call me tomorrow, and I'm gonna make you a star." I was like, oh
no.
Wow, nice. That's awesome. So I went home and I told my dad, I'm going to be a star. My dad was like, yeah, sure. All right. So the next day I called this guy, and he told me to meet him at a hotel in our capital. So I figured, all right, well, why not? I've got nothing to lose. So why wouldn't I? And he told me, wear a suit and bring a binder or like a folder or something you can carry paper in. So I figured, all right, well, can you tell me what it's about or anything? He just said, no, but it's going to take all day. I said, all right. So the next day, I showed up at the hotel, and outside, there were 20 people like me, all in suits, all very young. I think I was 17 or 18 at the time. So everyone was very young, everyone with their little binder. And then that guy came and took us with him to this huge conference room. And he basically tried us to give him our phone records so he could call everyone in our phones so that he could sell them funeral insurance. That was basically his scam.
Wow.
But since I was very naive, I didn't hang on.
Yeah, we can't have the cat disconnect again.
Yeah. Since I'm very naive and I was very young, I just went along with it. So I gave him my phone, and he called one of my friends. Sorry.
Whoa.
She's okay.
Yeah. Sure.
So, and he called one of my friends, and he made an appointment with his parents and told me to come along. So a couple of days later, we went to my friend's house, and his parents were there, and this guy tried to sell them insurance. And I just had to sit there next to him while he tried this and tried to coach me into basically scamming my friends and their parents out of money to buy funeral insurance. But I didn't do that. I just sat there. I was just silent. And then on the way back, when we drove back, he told me, "I'm sorry, but you do not have what it takes." And then he dropped me off at home, and I never saw him again. But that was
what? What's going on in Europe?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's so interesting. So I wonder, like, what have you met anyone else that, like, were you able to figure out who any of those other people were? Those kids?
Yes. Yes. I figured out because I only realized this afterwards. But what the hell was this guy doing at my high school graduation in the first place? But it turns out he was like the dad of some kid who went to school a couple of years earlier, and he was basically just recruiting people to sell insurance for him, not even with him. So yeah, I did find out who it was. It's also for a pretty big company. I think you guys have it in the US too. It's called Delta, I think, or something like that. It's like
Delta? I know that insurance company.
Yeah.
They do dental insurance here. Or that's what I have.
Yes, that's right.
That's what they do too. Yeah. So it was basically for them, but he did it in a very weird way. So yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that's what other I'm curious, like, what other jobs have you had? Your random jobs or whatever?
I think the weirdest job I've ever had was a couple of years ago. I was working for this elevator company, but I worked a graveyard shift, and I wasn't working on the elevators. I was doing dispatch. So what would happen is people would call me when they were stuck in the elevator, and I would have to try to calm them down while I called the fire department to get them out. But the colleagues I work with were all I was still very young. I think I was in my early 20s, but the colleagues I work with were all in their 50s or early 60s. So they were getting ready to retire, and they weren't really feeling it anyway. They were they weren't very happy with their lives. So what happened a couple of times, I was working the graveyard shift with this 50 or 60-year-old guy. And I could hear a woman on the other side of the line on his headset. I could hear her scream, like, "Fuck you, get me out of the elevator. I need to get out. I'm panicking. Help me, get me out." And I saw him look around, and he took his headset like this, and he just whispered, like, "If you don't shut up, you're going to die."
Oh my God.
All right. And then afterwards, he deleted the call. So there was no proof.
Oh my God.
That's so amazing. That's
so
an amazing story.
That was a fun job. And after that, I just rolled like Dustin. I just rolled into one freelance job to the other. I think the best job I've ever had was right before COVID. I was working at this school for kids with learning disabilities. And they hired me to make a documentary about them, which was pretty cool. It was pretty fun to do. Except there was this one kid who was acting pretty weird. He always sat by himself in the corner. So I tried to talk to him, and I had to interview the kids too. So I tried to interview him, and then a security guy came up to me and told me that I wasn't allowed to talk to this kid. And then it turned out that kid was one of our princes from Belgium. Like, he also went to school.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah, which was very weird, but also very very interesting to see how the royal family deals with that stuff here.
That's fascinating.
But it was also very, very enlightening to talk to these kids. They were like 10, 12 years old, and they had severe dyslexia or severe, they couldn't work with numbers, or they couldn't really talk, or there was something wrong in that regard. But they taught those kids how to circumvent their problems and be a member of society. So that was very, very interesting. But then COVID hit and the school closed. So I couldn't finish the documentary. And that's, I think, around the same time I started working for you guys. Yeah.
Interesting. Man, that's a bummer. So you have it's like, there's so many half-finished things out there, half-finished novels, half-finished films, so on and so forth. Dag.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Did you have more you wanted to say?
No.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know if I interrupted you. Dag, let's hear your complete CV. Beginning at the very beginning.
Wow, that would take a while. I'd have to tell Dustin, you would have loved the 70s, man. My pediatrician used to sit smoking in his office.
Oh, hell yeah.
With 5-year-old Dagan and 5-year-old Dagan's mom in that consultation. He was an awesome guy, but he would be smoking in his office with his patients in it. Kids.
Dude, that's like on Mad Men when Don's wife is at the gynecologist and he like takes off his glove and then immediately lights up a cigarette.
Dude, socially completely acceptable. That's just the way it was.
It's really interesting how that
it's
happened.
so crazy. It's not that long ago.
Yeah.
You know?
It wasn't.
But all right, so my jobs, I love going back to think about early jobs because as Dustin was telling his stories at Locke too, like it just makes you realize when you get older that in retrospect, like any job you could have worked that make a good story was an experience worth having, right? Because it was kind of you learned something. It was funny. You have a memory. I kind of love that. You know, I did a lot when I was a kid through high school and college. I worked in a supermarket. I worked retail, clothing, especially apparel retail. So many Gap, Banana Republic, J. Crew, Urban Outfitters, Anthropologie. Then when I got tired of that, I started waiting tables, which was actually, I hated, but was very lucrative way to put yourself through college. I worked at a skate shop. I managed another skate shop. I managed a skate team for a very short time, which is a story for another time. But I went on the Northeast United States leg of a tour with this skate team, this Philly-based skate team, and that was it. That I threw in the towel after that. I didn't even continue down south. I quit on tour. It was horrible, horrifying experience. But the one story I'll tell you guys was my most short-lived employment experience. It lasted 2 weeks. And thinking back, it's kind of hilarious because it was such a harebrained idea to begin with. So I'll give you guys some context. I worked in a supermarket part-time for the last couple of years of high school. Our dad worked part-time for this Long Island-based supermarket chain, Woolbaum's, and had, various ins and inroads through this company, and basically went to our local store and went to the produce manager and was like, my son needs a job. And I got in, no questions asked, and I worked part-time. And then as I was approaching graduating high school, I hated the job, by the way. I just thought it was it was a lot of work. You're lifting 50-pound sacks of potatoes. It's constant. It's kinetic. You can't really ever stop. You're stocking shelves. You're dealing, and plus you had to deal with customers. So there was nothing that slightly introverted, shy Dagan liked about it either. You have to be out on the floor. Like there was really nothing. It paid bad.
Can I be honest with you about something? I've just as sorry to interrupt you, is that I never worked a job like that, like a stocking shelves job.
Sure.
Or and I wouldn't want to do that as like an adult, like with a career and stuff. But I always felt like that would have been very satisfying, specifically like doing the night shift when no one's there and you're like just stock and they leave, they leave all the boxes in every aisle and then they just put, I'm like, I feel like that would
see that.
I feel like that's a job for someone. Like, I feel like someone's like, yes, this is my pocket. Yeah. So I don't know. I hear that and I'm like, putting the potatoes out, putting the onions out, helping Mrs. Williams with the fucking broccolini, that sounds somewhat intriguing to me.
I did like the displays. Like that kind of spoke to the creative parts of me. Like, oh, I'm going to make this colorful. I'm going to do these lines of color, the green apples and the red apples and the orange. Like there's color breaks. There's a lot to it. I guess it's kind of interesting. I would have liked the moonlighting shift, especially working like in the grocery aisles. Stocking, especially now, because supermarkets were 24 hours then, but they're not anymore. So they close the doors at 11 o'clock, midnight, and then you really do have autonomy and independence, and you're just kind of you're probably operating from a list, right, that your manager gives you, and then you're here till 8 in the morning, just get everything done. There's something about that sounds appealing. But
24-hour supermarkets are awesome, by the way. I love them.
Yeah, supermarkets are kind of fascinating.
I used to go shopping in San Francisco at a Safeway in the Marina at like 3 or 4 in the morning. It was the best.
Oh, that's the only time to go food shopping.
Yeah, it's it's the best.
I'm so sad that
as long as you don't get jumped when you leave, you never really know what's going to happen.
Well, there's
never know what's going to happen in San Francisco. But I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Groceries. Yeah, there's that. But that era is gone, especially here in the Philly suburbs. Not only do diners close at 9 o'clock, which is like unacceptable. We're not used to that in the Northeast.
Oh, what the fuck's the point?
It's so crazy. The supermarket's closed now too. So if you're not in there by 10 o'clock, you have an hour maybe before it closes. It's kind of sad.
Diners don't close.
No, that's a thing. That's kind of an affront to our sensibilities, right?
Yeah,
Especially as Americans.
That's ridiculous.
Especially in the Northeast, you know. But there was one. So anyway, I was getting ready to graduate high school, and I had this job that I really didn't like. I saw it as a complete sort of intrusion of just my time with my friends, time playing games, time skateboarding. Like, it was just a complete hassle. I hated it. But when I was getting ready to graduate, you know, I informed my parents, who obviously knew, right? There was really nothing on the horizon in terms of college. I was really putting that off. And my dad came to me right before I graduated in high school. Is like, if you're not going directly to college and you plan on taking this year or so off in between high school and art school, you're going to work full time. And I hemmed and hawed, but he held my feet to the fire, and I had to go from part-time to full-time at this supermarket, and I friggin' hated it. And so in the meantime, cut to all of my friends, a lot of my friends, probably 3 or 4 of them that I was skateboarding with at the time, sort of my circle, were working at this bagel place, which was far from my house, actually. We lived on the South Shore of Long Island. This place was on the North Shore of Long Island, so probably about 30 miles away from where I live. But that's primarily around that space of the bagel spot was where I hung out and where we skateboarded in that town, and my friends lived and everything. So they were like, come work at the bagel place. And I was like, yeah, sick. That would be amazing. I think what appealed to me about that, though, and what I hated about working as a kid, especially, was, you know, that feeling of you're just trying to enjoy your day, but you know you have to go into work at 3 o'clock. You know, it's hanging over your head. I hated that feeling. So I thought, okay, the bagel place is kind of cool because you got to get up early in the morning, but you're done for the day by around noon. And I just kind of love that idea. And I love the idea of, like, as soon as I'm done, I'm going to take my apron off. I'm going to grab my board. I'm already here in the town where we were always hanging out anyway. Just going to go skate. The girls we hung out with were around there. So I was like, this is a kind of all-in-one solution. This is amazing. This is going to be great. Here's the catch, though. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a driver's license. So it was on our dad to wake up and get me to this place by, I guess I had to be there like 5:30 in the morning, right? Because the place opened at 6 or 6:30 or whatever. He had to get up, and for some reason, I don't even know why he agreed to this, but I had this harebrained scheme, and he was like, all right, I guess, you know, we'll do this. He woke up. I think he was injured on the job right now. So he must have been out on disability, or else he would have not been able to do this. So somehow, not only did that exist, but also he kind of gave in and was like, all right, I guess I'll go along with your plan. Sounds a little suspect to me, but I'll go through with it. So he woke up, he drove me there every day. And then I think one caveat for him that he was kind of won over by was that he didn't have to pick me up because I was just staying in town after work anyway. So I could get a ride home from a friend later that night or whatever. So he only had to drive me one way. So maybe that was a selling point for him. So I work for this woman, and I'm going to tell you her name because I think it's a big part of the story. Her name was Joan Lipschitz, that owned this
dude, like
place.
Rugrats.
Yes, that's right.
Doctor.
And you know what that was? Yeah, I guess Rugrats was around that time too, early 90s, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that had already existed. But here's the thing about Joan that owned this joint. She was the first person I ran up against in my life who was just completely just impervious to charm. Like she was such a miserable person that you couldn't win her over with being polite or your manners or maybe make a little joke. She was like, she would just stonewall you. She was just nasty. She was just a nasty individual, like somebody really hard to deal with. She was a taskmaster. So she would say, you come in, you do this, we get the dough, you put it in the oven, you got to get the cream cheeses ready, whatever. And it was her way or the highway. Very mean. I think I already kind of knew her a little bit just from my friends working there already. But she was a really difficult person to work for because she was just obnoxious. And I think there was already that personality conflict from the beginning because I was sensitive and I wasn't used to dealing with people like that, you know. And 2 weeks into the job, one of the big things with this place was they didn't make the bagels in-house, but they got the dough shipped from Brooklyn every morning. So let's say by the time we opened the doors, the dough was there. We get them in. So we had to put the bagels on the trays, and then we had to bake the bagels first thing in the morning. So there would be a batch ready for when the doors open, right? So, but there was a very specific way of doing it. And for some reason, the ovens that she had didn't operate on timers. So they wouldn't have an automatic shutoff. So if you forgot to take the batch of bagels out, you would burn them and they would be ruined, right? So 2 weeks, not 2 weeks into this job, I inadvertently, accidentally burn a batch of bagels. And she goes fucking crazy on me. I mean, in front of the customers, I think we were already opened at that point. There were customers filing in at that point. And she goes crazy and she calls me into the back and she's yelling and screaming at me. And I quit on the spot. I remember taking my apron off and being like, well, this sucks anyway, or something, kind of mouthing off to her in some way. And she, by the time I got out and was walking, right, like the walk of shame out of the building, she was standing by the door with my last paycheck, I guess, which was my second paycheck, and said goodbye. And that was it. And in retrospect, it was only a bad job because my boss was so impossible to deal with. Like, had she said, like, all right, you know what, that's annoying and you just cost me hundreds of dollars, but it happens, don't worry about it, who knows, right? I could have went on to be the manager of that joint. But that was a really interesting sort of blip in my employment radar, because I remember walking out of there and like, oh shit, first of all, I got to tell my dad that I quit a job without having something else lined up. And even as like a 19-year-old, I knew that wasn't the right way to do things. He's going to be pissed. And then the other thing was, I left a job that I had had for probably 3 years up to that point. Now I'm thinking, my dad's not going to let me not work. So that now they got to hire me back, which somehow he finagled me to get back in there. But I think it had to start as part-time and then graduate to full-time again. And he was pissed about that, but I was actually happy because my hours got cut and stuff like that. But the bagel place was an interesting experience. You know what it spoke to, though? Delis, bagel places, all of those sort of service pizzerias, I guess, would be the same way. That's a really hard job. Those people work really, really hard. Just the food industry in general, but especially the ones that open up so early in the morning. I'm sure Dunkin' Donuts would be the same way. 7-Eleven, Wawa,
time to make
right?
the donuts, man.
It's tough,
Yeah.
tough stuff.
He was always
man.
up. He was always up in the middle of the night. That guy. You never saw him at high noon.
Well,
He was sleeping by then.
You mean Dunkin'?
Dunkin',
Now.
Yeah, Dunkin'.
No donuts.
Yeah.
Dagan, you're absolutely right about that. Just when Holly and I were first married, she worked at a local bakery in the back as a baker. And so she was leaving that. I think she was getting up at 3 or something. So you think first about the pain of having to get up that early. But what really caused a strain, not for us like we were having problems, but it was a struggle that she had to go to bed way early.
Yeah.
Like super early.
Sure.
And it was like,
Yeah.
if I'm out let's say I'm working at a shoot late and I get home and it's like she has to go to bed or is already in bed. So I would just, the shout out to the people that do that kind of work, because some people really make it work out, because my aunt and uncle have worked at Walmart basically my whole life. And it's like, oh, they work at Walmart. They've like worked their way up, but since they both work there, they just both work the night shift together. And they have like,
cool.
They totally design their lives around that, and they're super happy. And it's like, that's the way to do it. But anyway, sorry.
Isn't it interesting though? Like working in a bakery, like I know there's a giant, I don't know how it is in Europe, but in the United States, there's an employment crisis. People can't find labor for anything that's not like $50 an hour and above, let's say. So supermarkets are afflicted by this, fast food industry, retail.
Yeah.
And you wonder when you see people work in a bakery, like, why would they choose that unless they like the idea of getting out early? But then,
I think it speaks to people that just like have different schedules, you know. Because I
schedule appeals.
My ex was a nurse and always worked the night shift, and completely obliterated my own internal clock, but she loved it. She worked like 11:30 at night to 11:30 in the morning.
Yeah, and she really liked that.
Yeah,
or she seemed to really enjoy.
Yeah,
that.
she did. Or 7 at night to 7 in the morning sometimes. So it was like, it was like totally weird. But I think some people just really dig that. That's what I was saying about, like, you can see that with like being a custodian. Because when I worked landscaping and groundskeeping at Northeastern, we were in the physical plant, as it were. So we were like, the custodians were with us, and they all had like weird schedules. And I know some of them were like fucking way into it. You can go to work, like there's no one there, there's no one to bother you. I think it's good for people that don't want to really socialize, like these off hours. Same things with stocking the supermarket shelves and all of that. I can totally see that being appealing to people.
Yeah.
For most people, I think that's off-putting, but I think that there are plenty of people that want to do that. Plus, you get paid more usually when you work those weird hours.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked about a lot of my jobs. I'll go through them quickly because I think all of these stories have been told in the past, but my first real job was working at the stables, South Haven, on Long Island. This was like my friend Corey's mom owned horses, and then like I think got equity into this place or something. I don't really know exactly what happened, but it was the spring and summer of 2000 and into the fall of 2000. That was my first time really working, and we would get paid $25 a day. And like the only things we really had to do was like just these long stables of horses, and you would just move one horse. You would basically moving horses down one and like cleaning out the horse and then putting the horse back and then going down and cleaning the next one and like moving it down and cleaning it out. And then there were, all I really remember about it is that there was just piles of shit. Like you were taking their shit and just putting it in massive piles of literal just hay and shit. And like there were ramps that would like go up it to like get it on top of the pile of shit. And then there were certain horses that you couldn't deal with, like you weren't allowed to because they were known to be like violent or aggressive. So there were just certain horses like someone else had to clean up after. But that was interesting, and like that was like the first time I really like worked for someone or did something, and that was obviously like off the books and totally not legitimate. I've talked about my deli job ad nauseum, but that I worked that for a few years, and that was off the books as well. $6 an hour I started at, and that was I worked that job like from 2000. I guess it was a couple of years, 2000 to 2002. And yeah, that was a time dominator, like Dagan was saying. I mean, that's what I remember most about it was our sister Allie's best friend Janine's little brother Anthony. If you follow any of that, he had this job. He worked at the deli, and he was like, we were boys, and I think we had a math class together or something because I was like stupid math, so I was with like kids that were younger than me for math. Or I guess actually like he was actually advanced to like the 10th grade or 11th grade math or whatever I was in because he was smart in math. And so we got talking. He's like, "Oh, I have an opening at Swan Deli down the street," and so that's how I ended up getting the job there. And it was actually a pretty fun job. It was I work hard. I remember a lot of different parts about it, and it was cool to kind of ingratiate myself with a group of people, and that was memorable. But it, like I said, a time dominator. I remember working Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it was like Thursday after school, Friday after school, Saturday pretty much all day, Sunday pretty much all day. I think Saturday was something like 10 to 6. Sunday was something like 7 to 5 or like, I don't know what the fuck I was doing. Like, I don't know, like practically working full-time hours basically when it all came down to it. But yeah, so that was that job. And then my job during college, I had 2 of them really, was I was a groundskeeper and landscaper at Northeastern. Northeastern's a really huge campus. Actually, our sister Dana just brought her son Declan to Boston. He's going to be a senior in high school because he's looking at schools, and he was looking at Northeastern, and I was like, yes,
yeah, looks possible, right?
Yeah, and not yeah. I think he. Well, one of the things he wasn't crazy about with it was how huge it was, because it's in Boston, but it dominates Boston. It's like 80 acres or something crazy like that. And so there was a big groundskeeping and landscaping crew, and they took a lot of pride in I'm trying to remember the term. It was like urban landscaping or something. Like they were award winning. Like there was this guy, Chuck, we called him, who was like a landscape designer, and he controlled this group of like 20 something landscapers or whatever. And anyway, I joined that crew. They only had 2 part-time workers, and they were both students, and I was one of them. And I got the job because of our mom, who worked there and was friendly with them. And was friendly with like the custodian. Our mom went to Northeastern, and then she ended up working there for as like the assistant to the president of the school. And so she like knew the custodians and the plant people or whatever. And I think through them, then they found out that they needed helpers. I don't know how the hell it happened, but in the fall of 2002, I started that job, and I had that job all the way through college. Sometimes on and off, like I'd leave for a summer or something like that. And that's a really formative job for me for a lot of different reasons. First of all, it was like my first experience being around like a total blue collar crew of guys, like characters. And it was Italian dudes and black dudes and like there's all sorts of different people, right? And it was like really interesting. And I was 17 when I got the job, right? And I was 17 through 22, I guess, and kind of like grew up under them. And I think they took kind of like a somewhat of a fatherly interest in me at times, which I thought was really cute. And a lot of it was just grunt work because that was all based on, that was a union. They were in a union. The two part-timers were not in the union. So there were like very specific rules, like based on seniority about like what you got to do. So like I remember Al, his name, I won't say his last name, but we called him Lance for his last name, a play on his last name. And he was there for a really long time. He's just old Italian, like Boston dude. And he was just so funny. And since he was there for a really long time, he would always get to call dibs on what you would do in the morning shift. And he would always take like the vacuum machine, like that you drive around in. Like that was like what he always took. So that those jobs would trickle down. And so by the time you got to me, it was like, all right, so like I always had to walk around parking lots and pick up garbage. And like, I've said this before, snow piles in Boston were notorious, like massive. I'm sure Dustin understands living in Western Pennsylvania. Like, and as they melt, garbage is exposed out of them. And they'd be like, all right, Colin, you got to go climb you got to go to like this parking lot, this dorm, this place, and just climb the piles of snow and pick out the garbage out of them or whatever. And then it would melt a little bit more. And then you'd have to do that again. And that was the kind of shit that I had to do. And then when like spring and summer would come around, I'd be like mowing lawns. But since again, it was all based on like seniority, I would have like a push mower. There would be like people on the ride on mowers, like the big ass industrial mowers. And then it would be me doing like the sides with the push mower or like weed whacking, like doing the grunt work. It was, and the one thing I remember about it though is because they were award winning, they spent a ton of money. So like, when you plant like bulbs and you plant, like you let them go for years sometimes, right? They would have like a scheme of bulbs and flowers and annuals and perennials. And then after the season was over, you would just rip them all out and then plant new ones and do new ones. So like we were just constantly replanting the same 500 beds with things like every few months. And that's what I remember about it was because I remember it was so industrial that, you use the little, like when you plant the bulb, you use a little twisty thing and you pull the dirt out. I remember when they were like, all right, you're going to go plant bulbs. And I'm like, where are you going to give me one of those things? And they're like, oh no, you don't do that. And they show me like what you do when you plant it like this is you just dig out the entire garden by hand and then plant them all and then slowly just put the dirt on top of them, and then you 3 months later, just rip it all out and just do it all again. And so the dirt is it was an interesting job. And those guys were really nice to me. And I appreciate those guys a lot. And I sometimes wonder about them. There were so many different characters. There was a guy named Brian who was like mega religious. When we had an apartment on campus and we would all gather there for lunch and if it was raining or whatever, and then everyone would kind of watch TV. That's when I got really obsessed with like Game Show Network. They had a complete collection of Playboys from probably 1970 or 1969 all the way through to the current, like all sorts of really funny shit that's probably not okay to have on a college campus today, or like that they would get in trouble for having at work. And so he would sit like in the back room and read the Bible and like eat his lunch or whatever. I always remember that about him and like be like, and then there were dudes just always busting each other's balls about all sorts of things and like these rivalries and these just fucking fun, like a couple guys that were just constantly getting their balls busted. It was just so funny. They were really interesting. And I remember what I worked there and that was the first time I was really making money. And it wasn't a lot of money. I made $10 an hour. Right. Like, but I was like, I could work as much as I want. And I was like, damn, I'm 18 years old. And there was like as a freshman, I was like, I should just quit and just do this. There really was a moment of that time. But as people know, during that time, I was a IGN freelancer as well. I started freelancing around the same time I got this job and did them both. And I was a intern at IGN twice, once in 2003 and another time in 2004. I don't think they even do internships anymore. I think actually I was the last intern that they ever had.
Wow.
Like of any real consequence, like, like a real intern. And it was totally illegal. Per always talked about that. Like it was what we were doing was completely illegal, but it was fun. And another job I had during college briefly for a semester and a half was I worked at the Massachusetts Historical Society as an intern in a transcription program for history majors and it was for American Revolution documents. So I had an interview there. So the head of the Massachusetts Historical Society at the time was named William Fowler, and William Fowler was a professor at Northeastern and then left there later to become a professor at Northeastern. So he liked Northeastern history people. And I went for an interview and they hired me. And I basically would just sit with a laptop in the library and they would give me old documents and I would just type them up what they said. And I think you could still find it to this day. Like there's like a specific project that they did for the Revolutionary War where I'm cited in it as like one of the people that like transcribed all this nonsense. And I remember transcribing these journals of like Revolutionary War fighters and all sorts of stuff. And it was really cool. And I would get in trouble, or I got in trouble once for taking my glove off and trying to touch something without without a glove on. And there's like a librarian in there that got mad at me. And another fun memory of me is David McCullough, who wrote John Adams, which is an awesome seminal work of American history. His follow-up book to that was 1776. And he was writing it when I worked there. And he was there was a big reading library there where they would bring you what you wanted. Like you would kind of order your documents or whatever, and then they would bring it to you. And he was like in the corner with all this shit spread out. And I never bothered him or whatever.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I have a memory of that. And that's what he was writing was 1776. And I wanted to be an historian so bad at that point. That was like a dream world for me. So that was really cool. Like when I got hired, they brought me into their vault. They have a complete collection of John Adams's effects and John Quincy Adams, a lot of Thomas Jefferson stuff and all of the rest. And they have like a temperature controlled vault with all of it. And when they hired me, they brought me in and each letter is kept in like a manila envelope. I think they're like slid into these like cubby type holes or whatever. And he would just like literally pull them out and open it. And it was literally like a letter from John Adams to Thomas Jefferson. Incredible.
Wow.
You know, and he would just be like, you just put it before me or whatever. And he's like, this is, and then he would close it and you open it and it was fucking crazy. I was like, this is insane. You know, that you have this stuff. This is incredible.
Yeah, that's right up your alley. That's your whole thing.
I just don't understand how anyone could not find that fascinating. Like, that's history on the page, man. That's like, who touched that? Who mailed that? The correspondence and the provenance. Oh my God, that's the stuff. And then IGN, everyone knows that, kind of funny. Everyone knows that. And then The Last Stand and then Lily Mo. The one thing I wanted to say in reflection on this really good topic, in my opinion, is just that I don't feel like I had any bad work experiences. And I think I'm pretty lucky. Like I was not on the outs anywhere. I quit some of my jobs. I quit IGN. I quit the deli. Ultimately, I quit being a landscaper and all the rest. But I didn't have like a negative experience. I wasn't abused in any way. Like I wasn't taken. I don't think I was taken advantage of. I think that freelance rates are predatory in the games industry. And they were certainly predatory then. I used to get paid when I started writing strategy guides. I got $200 a guide. I mean, we would do the math sometimes, and that would come out to like $2.25 an hour or something like that.
Right.
But we wanted it so bad, and so we did it. And ultimately, I was really a driver at that time of getting prices raised, so that by the time I left, you were getting $500, $600, $700 for a guide, depending on how big of the guide was, which is still underpaid because people that used to write the Prima and Brady guides would get paid $5,000 or more.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, and I don't think anyone cares. You're not gonna be able to, and who gives a shit, is that some of the dudes that worked at IGN would ghostwrite Prima and Brady guides. They were not allowed to write. And so the powers that be wouldn't know. And they would basically be put in like hotels or like put away for like a few days with a game and be given like a flat rate for doing it. And like my old friend, Jeremy Dunham, who was the head of IGN PlayStation for many years and the founder of Podcast Beyond, used to do that. Like used to write guides with his wife, where his wife was like taking the screenshots and doing everything. And he was writing them while I think all this other stuff was going on because the money was so good. Meanwhile, the guides that were on IGN, we were being paid like nothing for it. And they were making so much more money on them. Yeah. So things started to balance out, but I feel bad for freelancers now because now they get paid like shit. You used to get paid by the word. You used to get paid. They used to value the written word. I used to make so much money as a freelancer. Like I look back and I'm like, damn, dude, I used to make like a few $1,000s a month if I was writing for IGN, which is like when I was in college, I was like, this is kind of awesome. That's why when they hired me at IGN, I wasn't really expecting to ever work in the video game industry. They offered me the job. because it was just open. And that wasn't because I was like amazing. I think they were just lazy about it, which I appreciated. And they're like, well, Colin's here and he's good, so let's just offer him the job. So I definitely benefited from a lot of luck and timing as well. And I always say that when I wrote at GameFAQs, that I was talented at it, yes, but there were better writers than me, certainly. And it was just a timing thing. It could have been any of us that got sucked into that world. So I'm really grateful for the whole luck component. And I think not having a negative work experience is in itself lucky.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's rare.
Right. Shall we move on?
I have one small comment and one little fix. I realize I have had one other official job as a bartender.
Oh, right.
I don't have a lot to say about it because I don't want to say I had a bad time. It just wasn't particularly interesting. I never had a situation where it's like guys getting in fights or, something like that. The weird stuff, quote unquote weird, was just like, oh, there's people making out over there. Should I say something? Some stuff like that. And that would probably be, I don't want to say the most negative because it wasn't negative. I enjoyed working there. I enjoyed a lot of our patrons. The problem was there was a time when I was editing Last Stand podcasts, or Colin's Last Stand at the time. I was going to work at my video job. And then, so I would like go to my video job. I'd have an hour maybe at home. And then I would work till 11 at the speakeasy just once a week. But that one day was fucking horrible. So
yeah, that's hard.
Yeah. It was a negative experience from the time perspective. Just that even I know that some people do that like 5 days a week. And I don't envy that. But the one day a week, I was like, I don't need to do this. So, but yeah, that's it. I just want to make sure that was on. I know I've told people about the bartending job. I don't know why I didn't even think about it. It was kind of a short time for like maybe a year, but no, I'm glad I could hear about everybody's jobs, and I'm glad we're all together now at this job in one way or another.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a good place to be. I'm mega grateful. Like I think that there are people that have an eye and a mind for business. Like I even knew them. And Dagan will know, like my childhood friend, Tim, he ended up, I believe, becoming an accountant or something in finance. And like, you always knew that was going to be the case with him. Like he just had a mind for it, an eye for it. It was hysterical. Right. And it's what he gravitated towards. I think I just kind of got, it's almost like a string theory where it's like, I got bumped into another timeline where I suddenly became like entrepreneur and business owner, but I never wanted that. That was like not a desire. I was happy to work and not to think, I guess, bigger than that. And now that I've found myself in this position, I'm incredibly grateful for the multi-tiered flexibility that it has afforded my life. I mean, my life is incredible just from a standpoint of control. And I don't think I fully appreciated how much control I didn't have and how much control a lot of people don't have, which is probably why I'm very laissez-faire with the company, because I don't like to assert myself on people. I'm like, everyone should kind of just inertially go in their directions, and we can kind of just tap them a little bit to get them where we need them to be, but we don't need to like control their lives. And I think a lot of companies,
it's organic.
Yeah, in some sense, like I don't know. So I don't really know what I'm doing, I guess is what I'm saying. And I read some stuff sometimes, like how to there's like so much self-help stuff for business owners and entrepreneurs and stuff. And there's also so many different kinds of entrepreneurs and business owners. And I don't think I'm hungry enough to be like the hardcore, like our Uncle Michael, not the Uncle Mike that came up earlier, but our dad's brother is an angel investor actually out in Western Pennsylvania. And like, that's like to me, when I talked to him about his business, which I was at our sister Allie's wedding, I was like, that's a fucking businessman. I'm like, I'm kind of like a passive, happy enough businessman, like your local mom and pop shop kind of guy.
Yeah.
At the very best, but I'm incredibly grateful for just the time, the financial flexibility, obviously, and all the rest, because it's amazing. And Lilymo itself has been interesting to own as well. Although I really just consider myself a passenger on that ship. It doesn't have anything to do with me, or very little to do with me. All right. Let's move on to the next topic. Okay. I want to talk to you guys today. This was actually going to be my topic last week, but then I changed it the last second. So I made sure to write it down so that I wouldn't forget, because I forget everything. I want to talk about sentimentality. And the reason that this came to mind for me recently, and I noted it on a recent podcast or whatever, but is that I've lived in this house for a little more than 3 years, and I've slowly gone through things. So this has been the first time I've been able to unify all parts of my life into like one group of stuff. So my childhood stuff, like the stuff my dad has had since until I went to college, and then like some of the stuff I left at my mom's after college, and then the stuff I brought back from California and all the rest, and unifying all of that. And I finally, because we're getting our garage redone to accommodate the growing merch shop that you guys have been so kind as to support, lastdaymedia.store, I had to kind of like get down and finally be like, all right, this stuff's got to go. Like I have so many old things, like my old hockey pads, and like I have just sets of my goalie gear. And one thing I've kept all of, and it was interesting unifying all of this from all of the different times in my life, is that I've kept pretty much every letter and card I've ever gotten, going all the way back to the early 90s. And I have them all now, and I didn't read them or really go through them. Sometimes I would like look at them and just see who it was from or what the date was. A lot of stuff from Dagan in there and others. And I just put it all in like a bin and put it in my attic to like get it out of the way. And I was thinking that realistically, I'm never going to see this stuff again. Probably, maybe when I'm old, I'll be like very nostalgic and want to go like look at this shit. And there's like a lot of weird stuff in there. Like there's just a lot of stuff from just a lot of random people. But generally speaking, I was like, well, this is actually kind of just a record of relationships and I guess time and celebrations and all that kind of stuff. And it's very sentimental that I kept all of it like as a point, and then was able to unify it. And now it's kind of like my personal effects in quotes. And in going through a lot of this different stuff, like there's a lot of old school work. Like I found my old like notebooks and folders from high school and was like going through that and just reading the old dittos and things that are dated and old papers I wrote. And I realized that and I've always realized this because Dagan and I do a whole podcast about nostalgia, which I think is deeply connected to sentimentality, but is that I'm a pretty sentimental person. And but I think I am in certain ways, and I think I'm not in other ways. Like I'm not a prodigious picture taker, for instance. I actually get annoyed that people take so many pictures. It bothers me that they're almost meaningless now, because you just can take a picture of whatever you want, whenever you want. And that's cool in its own way. But we kind of don't stay in the moment. So like when mom's always like, oh, let's take a picture. Aunt Carla loves taking pictures, at events. Our Aunt Carla. And then I wanted to kind of do the coup de grace, which was like the most sentimental thing that I think I do, which is that, and there are pictures of them on my social media, I think some of them, but I write my name and the dates I've lived in everywhere I've ever lived, in some place where you probably wouldn't see it. And I did that all the way through leaving California in my last apartment. And I was telling Chris in a podcast we did that I think will go live before this goes live, that when I left California, like how there's like a nook for like a washer dryer stack in like it's like a closet for some people's apartments or houses. I sat on top of the washer and like turned around so like you could see the wall inside the closet, and then wrote like a bunch of stuff up there. And like no one will ever probably see that until one day down the line they've removed that washer and dryer, and then they'd still have to walk into the nook, turn around and look up to see it, but it'll have been there. It's probably there right now, as someone lives there. And I love that kind of stuff. And I used to write on my old dorm rooms, the top of every dorm room I lived in, I wrote at the top of the door, date, name, usually a quote of some sort. And that's probably the most sentimental thing that I do. I wrote, when I left IGN, I flipped my chair over that I used the entire time I was there, which was like one of those airline chairs. And I wrote my name and the dates on it. It's probably still spinning around that office somewhere. So yeah, that's kind of, it reminds me of, when you see, I don't know if you guys care about Egyptology at all, but like one of the cool things about the pyramids and some of the stuff is the graffiti, or like the graffiti at Stonehenge, like people kind of leaving their dates and like this person loves this person, and this adventurer was here and all of this.
That's cool.
So sentimentality obviously goes through time and ranges through time. But I'm curious if you guys are sentimental in any way. And Dag, I'll go to you first. What comes to mind for you with sentimentality?
Yeah, this is a good one, man. I mean, I guess I've always been a little sentimental, sensitive, right? I love nostalgia. I love thinking back to being a kid. Like that's one of my favorite things, to kind of harness that energy of just thinking back to a different era. But I remember when you sent this topic, I wish I remembered exactly who said this, but I remember being in my late 30s. So say about 10, 12 years ago. And somebody talking in an interview, as I remember, it was an actor. I wish I remember exactly who it was, but they were saying that they remember turning 40 and how the sentimentality just gets ratcheted up. Like when you hit 40 as a human being, it's the sentimentality is going to turn on like a spigot, right? And your emotional makeup is going to change. It's going to evolve. Your sort of level of wistfulness, right? Your nostalgia, your propensity to reflect or just think back, like everything's going to get ratcheted up to the nth degree when you hit this age. And I remember thinking, oh shit, I'm almost there. And you know what the story they were telling? They were saying how when they were younger, they were, I don't want to say more callous, but they were more in the moment, right? They were or concerned or thinking about the future and projecting and worrying about what's going to come tomorrow, where they hit this age and they remember watching TV, they were saying, and some random commercial, like a Maxwell House commercial came on, like a coffee commercial, a 25-second spot for coffee, and how they broke down and started crying in this commercial. And they were saying, like, last year this commercial would have never had that impact on me. So what is it that changes in a person? And I was thinking a lot about that. And, you know, it seems to me that as a parent, right, as a dad in my case, if you're paying attention, just the dynamic of having children, the very idea of sentimentality is built into that. Bringing somebody or, you know, co-bringing somebody into the world and then watching them grow up. It's impossible not to be sentimental about that, because the very nature of this person that you're in charge of, right? They're growing and they're changing and they're going through phases and eras. And all along the way, you kind of realize as a parent, not to be hyperbolic, but every day that passes is the last day you're going to have them at that moment. So every school year, right? They're in first grade. Now they're in second. Well, you're never going to have them in first grade again. I was just saying to Helene this morning, our oldest, our daughter, we only have her here for 2 more years before she goes off to school. And I could tell you, I've been a parent since I was 33, right? I'm 49 now. And so it hasn't been, you know, this wasn't a development that happened yesterday. Been a parent for quite some time. I have 2 kids. My oldest is going off to school. She's 16, but I get wistful about her being 15. That's how crazy egregious it gets now, where it's like, let alone me thinking back to when she was 4 and all the changes now with concerns about going to school and boyfriends and and driving, like, you know, the changes. So I think a lot of that, I guess I did feel the sentimentality sometime in my 40s, but that was because as a dad, in our case, the kids are getting older and you kind of realize, like, that's such a built-in component of your life to wax nostalgic about yesterday, because it goes really quick, dude. I know I told the story a couple of times on the various podcasts, but when I ran into that random person, we were going to visit Helene at her school. She's a teacher. Her school was getting renovated. There were construction workers all over the parking lot. Me and a then 4-year-old Lilia were bringing Helene lunch. And the construction worker, you know, this really friendly guy, really kind of a jovial dude, stopped me, put his hand on my chest. I didn't know this guy, and just saw me holding hands with my daughter and said, dude, enjoy every second. It's going to go quick. And thinking back at that moment, you know, maybe that guy was in his 50s at that time and I was in my 30s, right? That guy probably forgot all about that 2 days later. That moment, that random person, that encounter stayed with me for so many years. And that's the very definition, I think, of my sentimentality, and that it really is true. Like, you have to, I guess the nature of sentimentality is interesting for me, because I think about entertainment in one hand, but then I think, like, you know, you think about movies, you think about the effects of different TV you watch, maybe even a painting, certainly music, the emotional way those things resonate now, so much more impactful as an adult. Like, I could get driven over the edge by a piece of music watching Interstellar last week, right? It's like that Hans Zimmer score. It's like that movie just yes, it has the family dynamic, the father-daughter thing, but it's that music. That's what really drives me over the edge. So I think about entertainment a lot with being sentimental, but also just the notion of life is busy. There's so much to worry about. Everything's so fraught with anxiety. Just on a day-to-day basis that it's so important to kind of savor the moment. You know what I mean? Because that, or else what are you being sentimental about? I think about that a lot lately with my midlife crises and just kind of worrying my life away. It's like, dude, just you gotta
multiple
cherish
midlife crises. Is what you're saying. That's interesting. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what am I going to be thinking back on to enjoy if I just spent 2023 worrying about where I'm going to work? You know, that type of thing. So sentimentality is a big part of me. I also think it's interesting people that aren't necessarily sentimental, because I can't imagine not feeling that way. You know what I mean? Just just being in that emotional state. I guess thinking back to a kid, I've always been kind of sensitive and sort of in touch with that side of myself. But that's an interesting thing to be somebody who's not sentimental. I almost feel bad for that person if they can't sort of access that part of themselves. But that, for me, I think that's a big part of why my sentimentality has grown just as a dad. And just watching two kids grow up and knowing eventually that's going to end with them leaving home, not leaving your life. But that's really if I think about the nucleus of sentimentality, that's the thing for me, is just that inherent business that comes with being a parent, you know.
Dustin, where are you on this topic? This is a wide-ranging topic, obviously, as we can see, and so there's many different directions you can take it.
Yeah, as far as being sentimental, the thing that really comes to mind initially for me is that I'm turning 30 in September, and in a way, I don't want to gatekeep being sentimental, but over the last year or two, I feel like, oh, so this is what real sentimentality feels like, where it's like when you're into your adult era, you can understand and feel truly the pain of remembering. And I know that's kind of a lot of this topic ties into nostalgia, but I feel like it wasn't until the last few years where it's like, oh, sometimes I think about, as an example, I've talked about on Sacred Symbols how I've been to some of my favorite bands are doing 20th anniversary tours and stuff like that. I'm like, so what's after this? Like, what is the post nostalgia era? It's just nothing after that, unless we're here again in another 20 years at the 40th anniversary of this album or whatever. And it's like, it's kind of just moving on at this point in some ways. But I think about, in particular, an experience I had recently. And I'll start just by saying there's the quote, or there's the saying, like, remember when is the lowest form of conversation, right? I hate that statement. I think I understand sort of what it means, that it's like, if you are only focusing on the past, and particularly if you're around people that aren't part of your past, I can understand that being a low form of conversation. But last year, I was at my 10-year reunion for high school, and it was an okay time. Most of the people that I would have wanted to talk to weren't there. And the few people I did talk to, it was nice, kind of uncomfortable, but I think that's kind of the point. After it was done, me and one of my very best friends, Brandon, he gets brought up on the show all the time. We've been together since 2008. We went back to my house, and this was over Christmas break, so my parents were there, his fiance was there, Holly was there, and we just went through and watched all of the videos we made for the morning show in 12th grade. And we watched our old anything that we did. And it was like just this total, we're just going to sit, we're going to watch and remember all this stupid shit we did. We're going to talk about stuff. And I think about, like, that was a million times more like that. It's funny now, the memory of remembering, I now feel, I mean, that was only a year ago, but I'm sentimental about this. I'm like, that was an amazing time just to reflect. And, it's not, I think the thing about sentimentality too, is that it can be very positive. And I don't mean just the negative. When I say about the negative aspect, it's not necessarily the negative of that time is gone, but think about how sometimes some of these relationships has changed. Some of the stuff, some of the people that were in the videos that were very good friends with Brandon and I, it's like those relationships don't exist anymore. Sometimes just from people moving on, but sometimes there's things that happen that break those relationships. And so that's kind of painful too to think about. It's like, oh, well, at this time we thought we were going to be friends forever, as cheesy as that sounds, but then that doesn't happen. And so that's kind of painful too. But I think, I guess in the negative light that I'm putting sentimentality, at the same time, I feel like it's so important in that I always think of this song, and I don't even know if I fully understand what he's trying to say in the song, but it sounds nice to me, right? Sometimes you hear a lyric and you like it. It's this band Listener. They has a song called Wooden Heart, and there's a line that's, "We only have what we remember." And I think about that line all the time, and it's like I said earlier, you don't want to be constantly living in the past. Like, that sucks. And you're never going to be happy if you're only being sentimental. But at the same time, these things that happen in our lives are the things that make us. And there's an enjoyable aspect to that as well. So I feel like particularly now is an interesting time in my life thinking back on things. And just recently I was thinking with my 30th birthday coming up, I'm like, did 16-year-old Dustin or 15-year-old imagine himself in 15 years from where he was, double his age? Would I be happy? Would I be disappointed? Would I be I don't feel like I'd be like disappointed or anything, but I just don't think I would have expected my life to be this way. I don't know. It's just, you think of yourself in different ways at the time. And so, yeah, it's all about that balance, I guess, of course, with many things. So
it's such a good point, Dust. Like, your expectations lining up with what actually happens, what actually comes to pass, right? That's a big part of it.
Right. Well, and that's the thing too, is just that I'm guessing no one's life turns out exactly the way they expect, for better or for worse in a lot of ways. And I guess I'm very thankful thinking now that if I can look back, it's like, I feel like I'm pretty glad with it. I'm very happy with how things turned out. And there's things that I miss and things that I wish could have been different. But overall, I've been very blessed, and I'm very thankful for that. But I don't know. I feel like I've kind of ranted about a bunch of different things. So Locke, that leaves you with the very. So I feel like this is the happiest and most depressing topic at the same time, which as nostalgia and sentimentality is, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I come from a pretty big family, like you guys, like you, Dustin. I think you're an only child, right? But I have two older brothers and one older sister, and they're way older than me. Like, my oldest brother is 10 years old, and my other brother is 9 years old, and my sister is 8 years old. So I was very, very young. So we had a big house. We all lived together. My parents got along great. But then when I was 12, my brothers and my sister went off to college, of course. So that just left me and my mom and my dad in this big, big house. And then a year after that, my mom decided that she had enough of raising children, and she took off. So she left me and my dad behind, which is fine. People can do what they want to do, of course. So from the age of 13, 14 till I was 18, it was just me and my dad, always us two. And my dad did everything that both parents normally do. Like, he was there at every parent-teacher meeting. He was always home at 6 p.m. He had a very important job. He worked at the European Council. He was the assistant to the European president, basically.
Oh, wow.
He worked in the press agency there. And he always made sure he was home at 6 p.m. He would cook dinner. He would ask me how my day was. He would be there at every sporting event. He would be there at every school play. He would be there when I graduated, of course. He would be there at every birthday. And when I went to college, he even went to college whenever we did something special there. So my dad was really awesome. My dad was amazing. And I always really took that for granted. Now, a couple of years ago, when my dad turned 62, he decided he wanted to retire because he worked enough his entire life, and he wanted to retire early so he can enjoy life. And his plan was he was going to buy a house in the south of France, and he would leave his house here for me so I could keep living in our house, and he would travel to the south of France, and he would just go back and forth every other month or so. So we could
Sweet.
still, so we could still keep in touch. But 8 years ago, on December 5th, my dad, he enjoyed drinking a lot. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he enjoyed to drink now or then. And 8 years ago, they had this party at his old job to say goodbye to him. So we told my dad, like, Dad, okay, it's fine to go, but don't take your car because you're going to drink. Like, go take your bike. It's only a 10-minute bicycle ride or 20-minute bicycle ride. Just take your bike. So he said, yeah, sure. That's a great idea. I'll do that. So that night at 8 p.m., the cops showed up at my door to tell me my dad had an accident and that I needed to rush to the hospital because it was very serious. So I called one of my best friends. He took me to the hospital. I called my brothers and my sister. They all live up north in the Netherlands, so it took them a couple of hours to get there. But what had happened was that my dad had a stroke while riding his bike. And because of that stroke, he fell off his bike, but he hit his head on the pavement and he basically cracked his skull. So he was in a coma. He didn't know. He couldn't acknowledge anything. He didn't wake up. He didn't know that we were there. So he was in a coma for a couple of weeks. I think it was 4 or 5 weeks that he just couldn't. He didn't wake up. He was in a coma. So I was, of course, devastated. My whole family was pretty devastated. But the doctors told us, like, look, we still see brain activity. We don't really know what's going on, but we're pretty confident that at some point he's going to wake up. We just don't know when or how it's going to be, but we're still pretty hopeful. So after a couple of weeks, my dad finally woke up, but it wasn't my dad anymore because for some reason, he could only speak German. He didn't know he had any kids, and he thought he was at some kind of hotel in Berlin. Now, my dad, he could speak a couple of languages, but he was never fluent in German. But when he woke up, he was pretty fluent in German.
Oh, wow.
But the major problem, that's of course a problem because he didn't remember any of us. But the major problem was that he didn't recognize his own sickness, or he didn't realize that something happened to him. So he basically was in this different world in his mind. He was in a different world where he spoke German and he was in a hotel apparently. So the doctors told us, like, yeah, he obviously has brain damage, but we don't know how severe it is or how long it's going to take. This could go away in a couple of weeks. It could take a little longer, but we're still confident that it's going to go away. That it's going to go away. But after as the week passed, it became clear that my dad got more and more aggressive too, because he didn't understand what was going on. He had this room full of people telling him that they're his family, they're his sons and his daughter and his friends. So he got very aggressive. And he also got very aggressive towards the hospital staff, which is maybe understandable, of course, because he wasn't all there, of course. So the hospital, the only solution they had was to put him in a mental institution for the time being, of course, because they didn't know how it was going to evolve. And I mean, I think I was 30 back then. Yeah, I just turned 30. And we made, my family made me my dad's legal guardian because I'm the one still living here. I'm the one who was the closest to him. My older brother and sister, they all live pretty far away, well, a couple of hours away. So I became his legal guardian. So the hospital told me, we're going to put him in a mental institution. You have to sign off on this. So, of course, you don't really know what's going to happen. So I thought that the institutions would help us and they would tell us what to do and I would just take their advice. So I agreed to it and they put him in a mental institution. And that mental institution was basically like the movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So he just sat there in a chair, drooling all over himself. He couldn't really do anything anymore. Still didn't recognize anyone. And after he was there for like 6 weeks, the staff told me, like, look, we're going to be honest with you. Your dad is never going to be able to talk again. He's never going to be able to walk again. He'll never recognize you again. This is as good as it gets. So I was completely devastated. Of course, I was broken. The whole family was. So we started to look for solutions like nursing homes or other institutions. But then I figured, well, he hasn't been home for I think it was 6 months after the accident at this point. So I decided with my uncle, look, we're just going to take him home for one day to see if he reacts to anything. So we did. We took him home. And as soon as we were home, he started pulling books from the bookcase. Or he went to his computer. His computer was still on. The house was still the same as he left it. So he went to his computer and started reading his emails. Or looked at pictures that were on the bookcase. Or opened the closet with his old clothes in. And suddenly he started remembering very slowly. He was still only speaking German, a little bit of French here and there, but he started remembering stuff. And suddenly he realized that I was his son. So he finally had like the epiphany that I was his son. And we discovered that if he wasn't taking the drugs that he was taking in the mental institution, that there was still maybe something we could get out of him.
Mm-hmm.
So I took it upon myself to get him out of the mental institution, and I hired a 24-hour nursing service to keep him at his own home, at his own place. The only problem was that the nursing service was so expensive; it was like $20,000 a month. That I think after 4 or 5, 6 months, all the money was gone. Like everything he saved was just gone. So the only solution was to do it myself then. So I moved in with him. And luckily, the nursing service did such a great job that at that point he spoke Dutch again. He knew I was his son. He kind of started to realize what had happened to him, but he was still very aggressive. That was the whole problem. I don't know if you've ever been in contact with people who have brain damage, but the major problem with those people is that they don't live in reality. So they can act a little crazy from time to time. And my dad went completely nuts from time to time. He hit me. I had to hide all the knives at the house because he would just take them or try to stab me at one point. At one night, he just ran into the garden and started yelling that his son was trying to kill him. So the cops came and had to explain to them what happened. So it was just a lot of misery. But he was also still gradually improving, which was good. So after I lived with him, I think for another 6 months, he told me that he wanted to go to Amsterdam, where he used to live. So my brother and my sister, my older brother and my sister, they both live in Amsterdam. So of course I asked them first, like, can dad come stay with you? But since they have their own families, they have little kids, they said no, which is maybe a little bit understandable. So we looked for a decent nursing home there. We took him there. He could see the place. He agreed to it. He thought it was amazing. So we placed him there. He kept improving in the nursing home. So he kept remembering more and more stuff. He kept talking better. He saw my brothers and sister, recognized them as his own kids again. Started remembering things of his own parents again. So it got better and better and better. He was still very aggressive, but it got better at least. But then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, nursing homes closed down, of course. So at that point, nobody was able to visit him anymore. I used to go there every Saturday. Every Saturday, I would take a train to Amsterdam from Brussels. It's like a 3-hour ride. I would visit him for a couple of hours, and I would come back. But when COVID hit, I couldn't do that anymore. Nobody could. So he was basically alone in his room for 6 months and an end until we could visit him again. So when I finally was able to make it back there, he recognized me, but he was a ghost. Like he couldn't talk anymore. He aged like 20 years in a couple of months, and his health started deteriorating really fast. Now, mind you, he was still pretty young at this point. He was only 68 or 69, but his organs started failing. He was into the hospital, out of the hospital. I think over the past 2 years, I took him at least a dozen times to the hospital and back because his organs started failing. But every time they reassured us, like, it's going to be fine. His health is deteriorating, but he's still okay. So on June 5th of last year, I got a call from the hospital, and they told me, like, your dad is here. You have to come now. It's pretty serious, but we've been here before, so no worries, really. So I called my brother who lives there. I told him, yeah, you got to go visit dad again in the hospital. He's back again, but they told me not to worry. It's probably okay. So he went there, and I took a train to Amsterdam like I did every Saturday, but it was rush hour at this point. So there were people everywhere, all around me. I think it was like 6 or 7 p.m. And suddenly I got a video call, which I never get a video call from my brother. We only text or we call very, very occasionally. But he video called me. And of course, I picked up, but there were people around me. And the first thing I saw was my dad with a mask on his face. And he was acting really erratic, waving his arms. And then my brother came into the picture and he told me, like, you have to say goodbye. Like, this is it. This is the last time you're going to be able to talk or see dad. So, of course, I was very confused. I was completely out of it. There were people all around me. So I couldn't come up with anything better to say than, well, I'll hurry, just stall and I'll be there in 20 minutes. So, of course, the train got there. I got off. I ran to the hospital 20 minutes later, but I was too late because my dad had already passed away. So after that, I have to gather all his belongings from the nursing home. Of course, I had to put them in my tiny apartment. I had to get all the funeral arrangements in order, and I buried him at, like, I think 20 feet from our old house where all of us used to live. But now, last month or a couple of weeks ago, I had to go through his stuff because I still have a storage unit I'm renting too, which cost me like $200 a month because most of his stuff is still there. So I had to go through all of it. And I found like little notebooks from when he was sick, when he had his brain damage. And those notebooks said stuff like, my son came to visit me today. We had fun. I still have hope for a future. It was wonderful. Next year, I want to go on a holiday. I want to go do this. I want to go to a bar with him. And they were like pages and pages and pages of stuff, of like lucid moments that he had during those years where he had his severe brain damage. So I never was a really sentimental guy until I found those notes. And that completely broke me. I still read them every day because they're so nostalgic to me, because I thought for all those years that my dad was gone, but apparently he was still there for certain moments when nobody was around. So that makes me, of course, very, very sentimental, very, very nostalgic to those days. So every time I think of my dad, I get very, I get choked up, or I miss him. I miss him a lot. So am I sentimental? No, but I think when it comes to him, I think I am. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Interesting. You're a very gifted storyteller. That was a very cogent and very interesting journey through all of that. As if you've done this before.
Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. As if you have like a real, I don't know. Some people are just natural storytellers, and I got that vibe from, you like, I don't know. It's a very, very emotional thing. What you just described.
Awesome.
Your
dad sounded amazing too, like an amazing person.
My dad would have loved you guys. He would have loved this podcast. Colin, he would have loved discussing things with you, because I remember a couple of years ago you had a podcast talking about the people working for the European Commission or for the European Council, and how much you disagreed with them, and he would have loved to debate you on that. I'm sure. He was also very politically active.
I bet.
He was a great guy. He was also the best dad I could ever wish for. I know you guys still all have your dads, so you all have a great relationship with them too. So cherish it while you can.
Yeah, no, that's perpetually good advice. And yeah, it's like your dad was throwing this. What's the situation with your mom, if you don't mind me asking?
No, of course. Well, my mom, that's another thing. My mom left when I was 15. I never saw her again until a couple of months after my dad had his accident, and I was his legal guardian. And apparently they were still married, so she filed for divorce. And she wanted half of his money. So I had to basically, because I was his legal guardian, I had to divorce my own mom. So I had to go to court and show the judge that all the money was going to his treatment. And that she was gone for like the past 20 years, that she's not really entitled to anything.
Right.
And luckily the judge finally cleared us and gave us full, he put us completely in the right. So my mom is somewhere at this point, but I don't really know where, and I don't really want to find out too.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's a powerful story. Let's leave it there, I guess, and move on to the final topic. Seemed like one that should be buried based on its content in the show, just in case anyone got there. Well,
I was going to say, first of all, I'm glad you put this last, but
Yeah.
I know you guys had a topic a few weeks ago about trigger warnings. I'm not saying necessarily trigger warning, but you might want to, if you got this playing and the kids are around, you're like, oh, I'm okay with them hearing the fuck words and saying shit. This is a little bit different.
This is a lot different.
This is a content warning. Big time. Keep that in mind. Okay. Hey, it's Dustin from The Edit, and I want to give you guys a second warning that Dagan gets pretty heavy into spoilers for the movie Hereditary. So if you don't want to know that, I recommend skipping out. Just want to give you guys the warning. Back to the show.
All right, Dagan, take it away.
Air horns and graphics and the whole thing. No, Dust, that's fair enough. I mean, listen, I have this feeling like when we kind of stop recording and we exhale, like later tonight, I'm going to feel bad that I actually put you guys through this. But listen, now I've piqued everybody's interest. So we're trying something a little different with my topic today on Constellation. This is an experiment. You guys, the three I'm looking at, plus everybody listening and watching at home could let me know what you think. But I thought this would be interesting. First of all, I think it would be a wonderful platform for conversation. So what I did was I tasked the fellas with watching a short film. I think it's 29 minutes long. And first of all, this is the type of thing, a half-hour short film. It's not something we could really kind of fit into a knockback format, let's say. It's probably not enough content. It would probably, but it's something that fits really well into a Constellation format. Maybe we could talk about it for a half hour, right? For about as long as the movie is. And so this is the premise. Ari Aster, filmmaker. Most people were introduced to Ari Aster when he came out with 2018's Hereditary, right? Young filmmaker, has given us Hereditary, his next film, Midsummer, and most lately this year in 2023, Beau is Afraid. Kind of came one of those filmmakers that came out of the gate really strong. After Hereditary came out, sort of already seen as an auteur, even though he only gave us one feature film. And there was a lot of din, right, about Hereditary is the scariest movie ever made. People were comparing it to The Exorcist. It was kind of hard to not hear the conversation around this young filmmaker who was coming on and just making a splash, like you rarely see. And I became very interested in Ari Aster based on Hereditary specifically, because I don't know whether or not you guys have seen that movie or his body of work so far or the people listening, but when Hereditary came out, it was such an interesting horror film because it does have all the trappings of a traditional horror film, right? It has the demons, the supernatural elements, the jump scare, the spooky atmosphere. It has the blood and the gore. It has all those components. But what struck me about Hereditary specifically and made me so interested in this guy was that it was psychologically terrifying, this film, in addition to all the other things. Visual things. But what struck me over the head about Ari Aster was that this guy is not afraid to tackle the taboo, right? That film specifically had family secrets, suicide, a young girl dying horrifically. It had a mother telling her son, her teenage son, she wished he'd never been born.
We should censor all this. You're spoiling the movie for people.
Oh, okay.
We should definitely be. Yeah, note that, Dustin.
How do we want to censor it? Do we want to put a warning?
We'll just say spoilers.
Yeah, I'm just being sensitive to that because I know people get upset about those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But that really is what put me Ari Aster on what put him on my radar was his fearlessness. It was like, wow, this guy, or even just seeing that movie for the first time, I was like, this guy's exercising some demons. He's got some trauma. Now I went, since Hereditary and in the last 5 years, I've become fascinated with this young filmmaker. And I know a lot about him by way of interviews and reading about him and just kind of going on a deep dive about all things Ari Aster. But he really is somebody who's afflicted with familial trauma growing up, and also I think traumatizing himself as a young kid, which is a kind of a theme we talk about a lot on Knockback, specifically of watching movies and subjecting himself to things at too early of an age, right? Like he was watching Peter Greenaway and Lars von Trier and David Lynch and Stanley Kubrick way too young and sort of traumatized himself. And it's ironic that he's kind of doing the same thing to us by way of his films. So when I started to go on this Ari Aster deep dive about 5 years ago, I found out he did a bunch of short films prior to his A24 giving him his first feature. And the earliest, I believe, of those films was 2011's The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, which was Ari Aster's thesis film when he was enrolled at AFI as a film student.
That's so insane.
It's nuts.
This was he submitted for a fucking grade.
So
wow.
I mean, just again, the ballsiness, the provocative nature of it. I think what grabbed, first of all, it's a very upsetting film. It is a horror film, as I was saying to Colin in a text a couple of days ago. It is a horror film, but not in the traditional sense. It doesn't have the gore, it doesn't have the violence, it doesn't have the blood, it doesn't really have jump scares. It's just a psychological horror film vis-a-vis the fact that it takes a concept that I think is brilliant, but also in the same breath, almost unthinkably disgusting. And the bravery around not only thinking of an idea like this that's so exaggerated and hyperbolic, but the fact of saying you're going to craft this and make it a half-hour film and also make it your thesis and also frame it in the trappings of a really beautifully shot 35 millimeter film. You know, it has a very pristine, suburban, idyllic, upper middle class setting. It's beautifully shot. It's beautifully lit. It has a very it looks like film, but it almost has an upbeat sort of sitcom visual resonance to it. But the horror that's happening juxtaposed to that against that setting is insane. You know, it's the definition of really ironic. And I think from the moment I got wind of this film, like all of Ari Aster's films, it's free to watch on YouTube. And the first time I saw this, I was really haunted by it because I really thought it was ingenious, but I thought it took so much courage for a filmmaker to do something like this. And I know it's been a very divisive and polarizing topic. All of Ari Aster's body of work, including all his short films, but especially this one. But I think for me, I'm just as haunted by the film itself and the subject matter it tackles as somebody who I really think has an amazing vision. I think you're watching a filmmaker cathartically work out his trauma on the screen. And again, inspired by Peter Greenaway and Lars von Trier and filmmakers that have come before that have done that. But somebody who I think tackles subjects and is not afraid to go into territories that very few filmmakers will tread into. And I love him for that because he's forcing you to watch a car wreck, essentially. And I wanted to share it because I think he's got a lot of notoriety, 3 feature films in now as a director, but I don't think a lot of people realize that he's done these shorts, specifically this one. And again, I'll say from, we're going to obviously spoil the short. It deals with sexual abuse, which is a very hard topic to deal with, and one very, very, very selectively and very few times actually tackled in fiction, let alone film, because it's a very difficult topic. And he takes it and basically inflates it to an unthinkable degree with hyperbole and exaggeration. And so the whole premise of this movie, it starts off with, a young kid masturbating in bed, and about 3 or 4 minutes in, you understand that that's just the beginning. That's the conceit and the twist, which again is kind of a simple idea, but a pretty insane one to try to put across in a half-hour film, is that this young boy is sexually attracted to his father. So, and it turns out that the young boy is sexually abusing his dad. As he grows up, we find out in the film that, as you know, at some point, this was in the offing, and as he grows up, this young kid who goes on to be in his late 20s and engaged and finally married has been terrorizing his dad for well over a decade by sexually abusing him. And the father's, he's basically, they're trying to keep it a secret, but the mom knows, buries her head in the sand about it. And again, sort of this well-to-do African-American family on the West Coast, obviously, affluent, upper middle class, beautiful, idyllic suburbs. And that was the setting for this Ari Aster vehicle. And I think you'll see a lot of his hallmarks in, especially with the psychological horror, but other things too, that'll pop up later in his 3 feature films that he gave us so far. So what I wanted to, as I turn it over to you guys, I wanted to ask you how you felt about it. And I sort of battle myself with this movie, because here's the thing. Is Ari Aster doing one of these 3 things or a combination of all of them? And I want your take on this specific question and more, whatever you want to, however you want to take it, each one of you guys. But is he basically holding our head down and saying, I'm going to do a thing about sexual abuse and I'm going to make you deal with this topic. And the way I'm going to do that is by making it as unimaginable as possible, by basically reversing the roles. Everything you hear about a parent or an adult sexually abusing a kid, I'm going to make it the opposite. Is it that? Is it, I'm going to make you deal with sexual abuse in this no holds barred way and you're going to watch it? Or is it not a troll, but is this just a guy who has a propensity for horror saying, not only I'm going to take one of the most horrific things that nobody wants to talk about, sexual abuse, and I'm going to totally make it, I'm going to make it even stronger by making the kid the monster. And I'm going to show you that, you know, it's this kind of strange out of the box thinking and this harnessing of a taboo for horror, which later on, learning about this, that was basically the premise of this movie, was him and his buddies saying, what am I going to do for my thesis film? Well, what about taboo? And then Ari Aster saying, listen, I could take a taboo and I can make that even, I could take that taboo to levels that nobody would imagine, right? Or is it the type of thing, which I think is something, a theme that exists in this movie? What if, which is a kind of a what if premise, what if your kid, a kid, but specifically your kid, was this unimaginable, malevolent monster? What if it was your kid who was the monster, irredeemable, heinous, unthinkable evil, but it's not only a kid, but it's your kid? Or is it a combination of all those things? I want to know how the film resonates with you guys, because I don't know if this is the Catholic guilt in me or whatever, but I almost feel bad for appreciating this movie like I do, because it deals with things that are just so utterly repugnant and repulsive, right? But it's, again, I think for me personally, it comes down to a filmmaker saying, and it's the opposite of what Colin's saying with Sentimentality. It's a filmmaker being able to put all that aside and saying, like, look, no, I think what Ari Aster's said to us so far over the last 5 years, and if you date back to 2011, the last 15 years, right, is that no subject is off the table. I'm going to give you guys horror in the purest sense. There's no such thing as a taboo. I'm gonna make you watch this thing. And for me, I come away saying, wow, I'm just struck by, again, the fearlessness of that. And again, not only showing the filmmaking chops with how well it's lit and shot and storyboarded and acted, by the way. The acting is bonkers good in this. But also, especially for the 2 parent characters. But saying, like, this is going to be, you know, you're gonna be haunted by this. There's no way to come in haunted by that. But how did it leave you guys? Do you appreciate the brilliance of it, or should I feel guilty? I'm gonna go to you first, Locke, for this. And what was your takeaway? And also my apologies for making you watch it.
Yeah, Locke, this is your first time ever being on content, and then Dagan's like, "Hey, watch this."
No, I thought it was great. I thought it was brilliant that he flipped it. That it was the kid basically, abusing the parent. I've never seen that before. It made it very not cliche, even though the story itself maybe was a bit cliche, but it certainly didn't come off that way. And what it did to me as a man, we don't, or at least I don't ever really know what it's like to be sexual abused. Like, it must be a horrible thing, but I could never picture it how it must have been for people in those situations. And this movie, of course, I still don't have a clue how horrible it is, but this movie at least showed me how horrible the psychological effect of it is. When you see how scared the dad is of his own kid, that really struck me as, oh my God, that is horrible. When you see him slowly creep down the stairs to get away from him, but the son still has to antagonize him a little. It's horrible. It left me completely amazed at how well he did this. You said it was his final entry at film school, I think. Is that what happened? Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. Well,
it was his thesis film.
Yeah. Well, I also went to film school, and they always push us to make stuff like this, but nobody ever does. I most certainly didn't. But he did, and he did it wonderfully. I was really struck by how much I thought it was brilliant. Yeah. So I'd advise anyone to go watch it, especially when you compare it to his other movies, like Midsommar is very, very different, but also the same. Like, you can see certain horror shots, like you said, like you can see like the doorknob moving, or you can see like certain angles that are very very horror like. So yeah, I thought he did a great job. I thought it was very, very confronting too for everyone who has a good relationship. Well, I just talked about my dad, so this movie was extra haunting for me. It was disgusting, and that's what movies should be. I think not every movie should be disgusting, of course, but movies should haunt you and should provoke feelings, and this one certainly did. So I thought it was amazing. I thought the length even was perfect. 30 minutes, that's perfect. So yeah, I thought it was haunting, I thought it was disgusting, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean, the strength. It's a gut punch of a movie. I love what you say about confronting. It's a confrontational movie. I think all of his works smack of that, but what you were saying too, where he went to school, American Film Institute, I think I read an interview with him saying like all the thesis films that came out in classes before him were very Oscar worthy, very traditional in their presentation. Just all the trappings of a beautiful film, gorgeous, high achieving, maybe even overachieving, but he wanted to do something that looked that way, but dealt with subject matter that was almost unwatchable, like would have people walking out of the movie theater. So to have a balance of those two things, which is just really incredible. And just, again, just to make something, create something with that kind of strength. I mean, I can't think of a moment in many films that hit me, smacks you across the face, like that kid's hand revealing that he had a picture of his dad. I mean, that twist
disgusting.
Is you're wondering, like, the dad walks in on the son, catches him in the act. It's already pretty awkward, but then as the dad's trying to make it right and leaving, that kid's hand unfurling and showing that he's masturbating to a picture of his dad. It's just like, you've never ever seen anything like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing that in the 100+ years of film, very rarely has something been tackled that way, because it's difficult. It's just difficult for everybody, you know? So where do we go from here, gents? Who wants to weigh in next on this?
Oh, I'm ready. I have some thought. Well, I got to give you guys some context about me watching this last night. Holly does not like horror. She doesn't like feeling too uncomfortable during movies. So I've told her about Ari Aster films. I'm like, you will never watch these ever. You will not like it, and it will be it's too much for you. But I know I needed to watch this last night, and so I tried sneaking one past the goalpost. We were on the couch. She was on her phone. I say, hey, I need to watch this for Constellation, a topic. I'm told it's very disturbing, but it's not traditional horror. I'm going to put it on. If it's too much for you, then I'll pause it and I'll watch it on my iPad or something. She was like, okay, that's fine. And then immediately the kid's jerking off, like, within seconds. We're like, okay, that's fine. Oh, this is weird, but whatever. We're watching it. And then, of course, there's the reveal of the photograph. And she was like, So immediately, when she was feeling too uncomfortable, pulls out her phone and starts looking at her phone. But then there's next the wedding scene. And so she's still fine at this point. And then as soon as you start hearing what's happening behind the fence, she's like, yeah, I can't do this. I can't. I was like, yeah, I get it. I'm like, I'm fine with that. And then I told her, I was like, yeah, honestly, I was trying to, I knew this would probably happen because it's Ari Aster. And I was like, but I was on it. I said we could turn it off. I knew that if I told you it was Ari Aster, you wouldn't be open to watching it at all. So at that point, I watched the rest on my iPad. I was just sitting on the couch, and there was a point. I'm trying to. There was multiple points where I was just like this, like I couldn't resist, like being like, oh no, like multiple times. This was quite the film that you brought, but I gotta say that while I am not the type of person to really seek this type of thing out, I do respect it in the way that Locke was mentioning, that it's like it's a challenging thing to watch, and want something that really is for better or for worse or for disturbing or whatever, it is stimulating. You think about this for a long time afterwards. Yeah. So I gotta say, the thing that really stuck out to me that I was thinking about this afterwards is that there's that the twist of the power dynamic, right? It's the kid who is assaulting the dad. But I was thinking about, there's the part, I think it's after the tub situation happens, and it's the next day, and he says to him, like, he kind of implies that he was complicit in it. And I think that where this really flips things on its head is that in the situation, the dad had the power to stop this early on because he's the dad, but he didn't. And eventually he lost control of the situation. And I think that that's kind of the interesting thing, is that in no way am I trying to imply that in cases of sexual assault that people are complicit in it. But I'm saying in this movie, in this film, there was a point where the dad should have said no. He should have said enough, right? But he didn't. So, and that's the impression that I got from that opening scene. Because initially, when the way he's being so friendly and so nice and maybe a little bit too involved in this moment where he catches his son jerking off.
Yeah, very understanding.
Yeah. I was like, oh, he's going to be assaulting him, because this is maybe a little too much for this kind of interaction. And I wonder if that's kind of like foreshadowing that, not that he was necessarily going to be the sexual assaulter, but he wasn't, like I said, he didn't say no. He didn't put his foot down and be like, this is totally wrong and you have to stop and we're going to get you help because you have a very bad, very deep issue that needs to be corrected. But he didn't do that. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting angle on it. And then, of course, I think it's worth mentioning is just the ending of the whole thing with the mom, who I think obviously there's many sad and depressing aspects of this, is that it basically was an open secret in the family, because I think that it seems like she really either finds out or has 100% confirmation at the wedding, right? Because she mentioned she has the suspicion at prom night that this is when that's when it began. But at the wedding is when you see her kind of look in and she sees it happen firsthand, right? And so, and then of course there's the whole when the tub scene happens and she's like I said, at that point it's like no one's trying to it's like he's kind of hiding it, that it's not happening directly and open, but it's like he knows that she can hear that. He knows that he has the power of the situation. It's like, what is she going to do? And so there's that ultimate, I guess you could call it empowerment at the end where she kills him, which is just, I mean, not necessarily a positive empowerment, but that's finally the last straw. But I'm really, the ending, of course, is the evidence being burned, that kind of this implication that even though, I mean, she murdered her son, so she's done regardless of the situation. But there could be kind of this thing that's like, well, look what I went through. Look through what my husband went through. But the shame of it is so intense that it is, and maybe it's the idea of protecting her husband in that moment. Like she would rather be charged with murdering her son than have the memory of her husband be permanently this.
Those are great points. Awesome points. And you bring up good points too about things that supposedly happen in actual sexual abuse scenarios, the victim shaming, bystanders sort of turning the other way instead of helping, sort of ignoring the situation, all the dynamics that you hear. The other statistic that I think about a lot is that you hear some really staggering number, a really staggering statistic of like 1 in 10 people, not in New York, not in Europe, 1 in 10 people on Earth right now have been sexually abused. That's insane. That's an insane statistic. And so a lot of people, unfortunately, could speak to this from an actual real life perspective, which is so sickening to think about. And you make another good point, Dust, with this before we turn it over to Kyle. I wonder, too, how much of this is a statement just about bad parenting. In other words, giving the kid too much leverage, giving the kid too much power. It's almost like the Veruca Salt dynamic, but taken a step further. Like what happens when you don't say no? What happens when you don't know how to say no to your kid, when all you do is placate instead of parent? Right? Mm-hmm. I wonder how much of that is also inherent in sort of, again, sending a message, and just really hitting you over the head with it. And just, again, doing it with hyperbole, which I think is so brilliant. I don't know if that's the cartoonist in me, but I always love when something is just presented. I had an animation professor that always said, if you can't exaggerate, you can't animate. And I just love exaggeration. Why not make something larger than life, especially if you want to say something? And that's what I love about Ari Aster. And I haven't seen Beau is Afraid yet, but I'm imagining he just continues the tradition of sort of, I guess, kind of working out his shit on the screen. There's something very genuine about that. You really feel he's haunted by ideas, maybe things he knows about or things that have happened or just things he saw too young. And he's channeling that and, maybe working out his shit by expunging it, sharing it with us, which I think is just, it's such an interesting dynamic because on one hand, you want to be angry at him. It's like, I can't unsee any of this. And that's the whole thing why I felt bad and why I kind of fought myself this week. Colin knows we were just emailing a little bit like, should I do this? Should I wait for another group? I never did a show with Lockmort before. So, it's like really, it's like trial by fire, my friend.
Yeah. Dagan, I wanted to comment on one more thing.
Sure.
I know Colin hasn't gotten to talk yet. I just want to say you mentioned the exaggeration aspect. There was one moment that I think the exaggeration was a little cheesy. The part when they're taking the photos and the kid keeps looking up at the dad. That was, I thought, a little hokey, like a little over exaggeration of the point. Cause that's like right after I think that's the moment after the photograph reveal. So it's a little too in the nose, I think, in that moment. But that would probably be my biggest complaint.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, did he want, like, we know from the photo, he has a crush. He lusts for his dad. We get it.
Yes.
You know. Yeah, it's interesting. So, Kyle, I've been telling you about this movie. You specifically have known about this movie for a long time, because when we sort of discovered Ari Aster together with Hereditary, you came to Hereditary a little later than me, but you really loved it. I remember you really loving it when you saw it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
I pretty soon told you about this film, but you hadn't watched it. So I want to know what you took away. And what was your initial reaction to it?
Yeah, I was a little bummed. I mean, I guess I didn't, until after I watched it, I didn't read anything about it. So I was looking for like an official way to get like a high resolution version of it. I went on Amazon. There's actually an autofill for it on Amazon. So I was like, oh, like people are searching for it. But I eventually went to YouTube, like you linked out to this version of it. And apparently, as I'm sure all know, it leaked. Like it wasn't supposed to even be necessarily widely released, and became, I guess, somewhat of a phenomenon when it was. But yeah, I'm not a film guy, as everyone knows, but there are certain filmmakers that I'm really attracted to. And everyone knows I'm really attracted to Christopher Nolan, for instance. And Ari Aster, based on just the 2 films I've seen of his, because I haven't seen the new one either, with Joaquin Phoenix or whatever. I feel like he's that kind of guy for me too, because Hereditary was awesome, but actually Midsommar, I'm not a person who watches movies over and over again, and I've probably seen Midsommar 7 or 8 times, like straight up.
Oh, really? Wow, I didn't know that.
Nice.
Like I'm really enamored with that movie, and was from the first few minutes I started watching it the first time. I was like, there's something fucked up about this movie. And lo and behold, there is a lot of fucked up stuff about that movie, but stem to stern, it's certainly like a top 10 movie for me, and maybe even a little higher than that. And so, yeah, I was open to that. I student films, short films. I don't know. I'm just not much of a film guy. So when people say like, oh, he did an interesting, 20 or 30 minute short film, I'm like, I don't know, dude, what is it like? On a fucking Sundance. I don't know what you want me to like do about that. But I went and checked it out, and yeah, it's mega disturbing. I agree with what Locke was saying, where I feel like there is something you can tell it's his movie, just by the aesthetic, and I don't know. There's something even about the chosen interiors and the darkness of the filming. It reminded me a lot of Hereditary. Actually, I think that you can like Midsommar is a little different in that it's actually quite bright and airy. It almost seemed like a direct reflection of that, and that's what makes it so scary. Like there's that famous scene on the cliff, I won't say anymore, from Midsommar though, where that scene is so scary because of how pristine and bright everything is, the flowers and how beautiful it is, and it's like, wow, this movie is fucking fucking twisted. But you can see that there's some connection, from my opinion, from the aesthetic between this and Hereditary. And as far as the subject matter is concerned, it's cool to do like a meta taboo thing where it's like it's a taboo and then it's like the total meta level of it. And I agree with what Dustin, I think, was insinuating, or maybe just saying, which is that I was reading more in between the lines of like a mutual, like, was the dad molesting him at some point? Otherwise, where does that attraction come from such a young age? Like, that's why I think that scene maybe is more seminal than it seems when he's like keeps looking at him. Why would he feel like, what would it be about a little boy that would like be like that with his dad from like a physical or visceral attraction? Unless it's just a film. It's just a film. I mean, it could just be that, but it seemed like there was more to it than that. But then of course the first scene kind of dispels like that they might just be the awkward nuclear family with the dad literally catching his son jerking off, and that's maybe the most of it from his perspective. But I just got this vibe that it was, and I think Dustin said this, that it was more mutual at some point and then got out of control. And yeah, the whole peephole scene at the wedding is interesting just because, yeah, she's not surprised. And when they talk about the prom, it's like, what could that be? Like him crying at the prom, was he crying because his son was gonna be with someone else, or was it from a sexual assault that happened or something, some awkwardness that way? I just didn't read, like, it wasn't definitive to me what they were even saying about the prom, and like what that could have fed into their mutual relationship. But then you read, and what is it, Cocoon Man, and he has this. That's what's so fun about this, is that like it's he's bursting at the seams to get this story out of him that he writes like an entire manuscript about it, but can't get it out. And it's a little, again, very filmish, where it's like you just delete it and it's gone. You could just send this to someone. You could send this to someone anonymously, send it to your publisher. He's an established writer, which is kind of interesting too, that they make a big point of that. So yeah, it's I watched it just this morning actually. And
start the day right.
Yeah, start the day right. Well, I like going, Dagan knows for Knockback especially, I like really, really going in as late as possible into things, so that it's the most recent thing on my mind, because I'm unfortunately in this job, I mean, one of the downsides of it, in my opinion, is just becoming a consumer, like consume, because you have, just by nature of it, got to move on to the next thing, and there's just got to be certain content parameters met. Like I need to play certain games and watch certain things, so I like to try to do things to the limit as possible, just so I'm remembering it most freshly. But that's what I think about it. And I do want to see the new film, although I don't know, it doesn't strike me as something that I'm interested in seeing. I feel like it looks like a little bit of a strikeout from. Did you see it, Locke?
Yeah, I did. I didn't. That wasn't one of my favorite movies ever. No, but I know a lot of people who really loved it. But it's not like any of his other movies. It's very weird. It's almost like I would compare it like a nightmare. It's almost a nightmare someone is having. So it's not really based in reality.
Yeah, it's surreal, right? It's supposed to be like a surrealist thing, which is cool because I love surreal art. I mean, that's one of my favorite fine art genres, as it were. So that's interesting to get into that, but I don't know. Yeah. There's just something. Hereditary is a really, really great movie, and Midsommar, just really, I don't know, it touched me. There's just certain horror movies that really. The Witch is another one of those movies where I'm just like, this movie is just very attractive to me, and The Witch especially is just like, damn, dude.
Yeah, Eggers is a beast. He's got a great vision for horror too. He's
movie.
Another one.
Yeah. Now, what a movie, dude. What a movie. Yeah, Dustin.
I have a question for you, Dagan. Do you?
Yeah, sure.
So I don't, like I said, I don't seek out too many disturbing movies. Every once in a while, though, I do watch one for, I don't know. It's a weird conflicting feeling after I do, because I'm always like, I like that. And I also don't like that. For example, a few months back, I watched a movie called Climax. It's the director is Gaspar Noé, I think.
Okay.
Have you heard of this movie at all?
No.
Because, I'll give you the Amazon description of it.
Okay.
It's this dance troupe. They're up in the mountains and they're practicing together, and they're having a like party after their rehearsals, and they're away, and there's like a blizzard, so they can't leave. Right.
Okay.
Someone puts like a insane amount of LSD in the punch, and everyone drinks it. And then what you see is the night that happens.
Really?
And it is insanely fucked up. It is, I think, based on you liking this and liking these movies, you should check out Climax. It's
I will absolutely check this out.
It's trippy, it's very disturbing. It's disturbing in a different way than this movie. But so I guess you've answered my question now. I was like, do you find yourself seeking out movies and stuff like this? Because you just said you were interested in this one, so there must be some element that it's like the.
What are you trying to say, Dig?
You know what brought me to this, honestly, was Ari Aster and just Hereditary, not just the conversation around the movie and how there was like this clamor of genius and unthinkable horror and the scariest movie ever made, and Martin Scorsese coming out and wanting to do, saying this is the most important filmmaker to come out since Wes Anderson. By the way, Martin Scorsese, there's a lot of filmmakers that come out. Robert Eggers, Wes Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson, right? PTA. There's a lot of great filmmakers that Scorsese never mentions. Wes Anderson and Ari Aster are the only ones he kind of put up on a platform and on a pedestal. So there was all that conversation that was like, well, I got to see what's going on here. But then after seeing Hereditary, knowing that he did a bunch of shorts, for something with me, it's a vision. When somebody has a very distinctive, authentic vision that is unlike anybody else, and then with Ari Aster specifically, mix that with the fearlessness, the seeming fearlessness, and the craft, but also just the ideas, just I'm struck by the very concept of Strange Thing about the Johnsons, because it's really, I was saying this to Colin, an email or a text, it's a very simple idea and a very simple conceit, but at the same time, it's pretty brilliant, just to take something simple and again, give it that twist. Just give it that little twist, that little spin, and now you made it something completely different. I just love it. It really is, to me, I think Ari Aster's a genius because of that. It's something that, and it's something that's not, there's no artifice. He's not putting it on. I really think that this guy's vision for filmmaking is to, again, challenge a little bit, and maybe this idea is for this movie is so sinister, I think, in a way that it's almost funny. It's almost comedic to make something that's this hyperbolic, and you're making something that's like, are you serious? Is this what this is really about? And to be able to disgust people by also saying, but also in the same breath, I'm telling myself, like, this is disgusting. I don't want to deal with this. This is as repulsive and reprehensible of an idea as I could possibly imagine. But at the same time, you have to sort of acknowledge it as brilliant. You may not like it. It may not be for everyone. I'm sure the Catholic Church hates this film, right? But he has a right to make stuff like this. And it's difficult to watch. And again, I think there's that part of me that feels guilty for sending it up. But dude, smart is smart and a genius is a genius. And I think you have to appreciate him on that level. And there's also the other side of me, Dust, that I know I mentioned a lot lately, that kind of regrets not going into live action filmmaking. I think I think if I could do it all over again, I think I would have went to school for film. I just really, I think I, in some ways, maybe missed my calling. And, I'm also very jaded on working in animation right now. And there's a lot of that, in all honesty speaking, that's kind of coming out. But yeah, the more time that goes on, the more of a live action cinephile I become. And I just admire it. I just admire when somebody has this distinctive set of chops, I think.
Cool. Well, it was a fun short film to watch. Fun in quotes.
See how many
go watch it on
followers I
YouTube.
lose
It is
after
available on YouTube, so people can go watch it there. I mean, there's as far as I can tell, no official way to buy it. I was trying to. I mean, I love Ari Aster, so I was happy to try to give him some money. Maybe he should figure out a way to distribute that or adapt it into a full film, which would be interesting. Although I don't think you want to go back and mess with it.
He does put these ideas. If you watch his next film that came after this, Munchausen, it's about a twisted mother-son relationship. It's interesting how he does that. It's not necessarily a sexual thing in the next movie, but he definitely takes those ideas and then plants them into Hereditary and stuff like that. So you could see him sort of creating things and then taking them to a bigger platform with A24. But yeah, why doesn't A24, if they could get in touch with AFI, where Ari Aster made some of these films, and just say, look, we're going to put out a compilation, right? Would there be a market for it? I don't know. If you guys are offended or, you're kind of faint of heart, might not be the film for you. Hopefully you watched before we spoiled the entire thing for you. And listen, there's not that many short films. I don't think we're going to be doing this a lot on Constellation. This is kind of more of a one-off, just an unconventional approach to a topic. I'm sure I'll go back to something somewhat normal next week, but I thought it could be fun.
Well, fun it was. Let's put it there. Well, let's say goodbye to everyone and go around the horn. Lockmort, it was good to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time. It's gotten dark there in Europe since we started recording.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I should have.
You can't control the rotation of the planet. There's really nothing to be about.
Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time. We hope to have you back soon.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
Cool. Dustin, goodbye.
Goodbye. I told Holly before I started recording, she went to Aldi. I said, get me the take and bake pizza. I need it tonight. So I'm very, very excited about that. Also, thank you once again, Lockmort. Great to have you. And good to be on the show. overall. So thank you again. Goodbye.
Dagan, goodbye to you.
Gents, super fun. Lockmort, it was an honor, sir. See you on this side of the camera. Hopefully much more of it. Long overdue. It was super fun. Thank you. And thank you for putting up with my crazy topic this week.
You're very welcome. No, it was fun. And it was good to be here with everyone. Fun combination, cool combination of topics as well. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand Media. Appreciate your love here on Constellation, but obviously the other shows as well. Patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access, of course, to this show and so much more. Laststandmedia.store for merch. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Constellation is a product of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by and is directed and hosted by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is my brother, Dagan Moriarty. The show is produced by Last Stand's executive producer, Dustin Furman, and is edited by associate producer, Ben Smith. All Last Stand theme music is by Ramon Narvaez, and all of our graphics and logos are by Dagan Moriarty. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's podcasts, including Constellation, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest support tier, and we're infinitely grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor.